Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 2501, At a Disadvantage. You've just torn his armor open. Roche exclaimed. It didn't last long, Zen said. Besides, I didn't know that he had a secret soul weapon. He trusted number 9527, and he believed that no secret soul weapon could block it in the Divine Land. The secret soul weapon Pascal had must have been given to him by the Yellow Emperor guards. I'll try again, Zen said resolutely. If they let Pascal continue to do what he was doing, everyone would definitely have no means to escape. Zen had no intention of sitting around waiting for his death. After he finished speaking, Zen's body gently floated, and a pair of thunder wings suddenly extended and spread open behind him. With a loud crack, he hurtled toward his target. He already had Pascal's position locked in. Seeing this, Roche also quickened his pace and approached Pascal from the other side. Holy Emperor, Zen is coming. Using his spiritual sense, Alfredo identified a consummate true god hurtling toward him at breakneck speed. Even in the darkness, he recognized Zen. He already knows my location, huh? Pascal sneered. He held the black sphere with one hand and conjured a spear with the other. At the same time, the huge wings behind him morphed from the original soft black feathers into sharp knives. Step aside, he said to Alfredo. Hearing his words, Alfredo immediately distanced himself from him. The two warriors were so powerful that their strength far exceeded those of holy beings. Alfredo could never withstand any attack from them. As Zen sped towards Pascal, the Wei's blending energy frantically accumulated. The long sword in his hand kept trembling and whistling. As the two warriors got closer, Zen suddenly waved his long arm. Crack! The sound of the long sword shattering into pieces resounded in the darkness. Just before the long sword broke into pieces, a strong and violent beam of sword radiance rushed straight towards Pascal. Nice timing. Pascal had foreseen this strike from Zen, so he was fully prepared. He suddenly shook his long black spear, and black energy continuously gathered at the tip of the spear. As he jerked forward, the whole spear totally turned into spear radiance and shot forward. Sky-crushing stab. Buzz. As a master of spears, Samuel had a superb understanding of spears. He had calculated his spear strike precisely. It directly collided with the Wei's blending strike that Zen had launched. The two kinds of energy collided, and the Wei's blending energy exploded once more. At the time, all light in the entire Divine Land was gone. The collision of the two energies did not emit any light. Instead, a thunder-like sound was heard, and a shock wave radiated from the point of impact. A consummate true god and a demi-holy being who were somewhere close were thrown to the ground by the shock wave. Black spears rained down their heads, and they perished immediately after being pierced. Come on. Zen didn't stop for a second. After lashing out once, he reached out his hand and pulled another long sword out of his space ring. Buzz. He launched a second Wei's blending strike. The sword exploded into pieces and fell from his hand. He reached out to draw another long sword and desperately channeled the Wei's blending energy from within him. The third strike slashed out again. As he launched 3 strikes in a row, Zen struggled to hold on. Although his body harnessed an incredible amount of internal momentum, he needed to combine the power of more than 2,000 godly Wei's to produce the Wei's blending energy. At that point, the speed at which the godly Wei's merged was considerably slower than the rate that Zen's energy was consumed. He had reached his limit after consecutively executing 3 Wei's blending strikes. Pascal was astounded as he felt 2 more beams of sword radiance coming straight at him. He didn't expect that 3 powerful sword strikes could be launched instantaneously. Zen's tricks couldn't possibly have been taught by the strong warriors at the other shore realm. The energy was the combined internal momentum of many godly Wei's. God knew how this boy did it. The sword radiance was too close, so it was too late for Pascal to dodge. The wings on his back suddenly extended and folded to totally enclose him. This time, he actually intended to receive the attack. Thwack, thwack, the 2 beams of sword radiance directly hit the pair of black wings. The Wei's blending energy was extraordinarily powerful. After the wave's blending energy in the first strike burst out, the powerful impact forcefully wrenched the wings open. The second sword radiance struck on Pascal's armor. The armor that had just been repaired was torn apart once again. This is my chance. In the darkness, Zen espied a blind spot on Pascal's body by using his spiritual sense. This spot was the area covered by the blood jade necklace. As a soul weapon, the blood jade necklace could not only deflect a soul attack but also destroy the spiritual sense used to detect it. Zen quickly approached while taking out the fourth weapon. The moment Zen thrust the spear into that spot, a warning from number 9527 resounded in his mind, "Be careful, Zen. It's a trap." Startled, Zen sharply turned around almost on reflex and felt an extremely powerful aura brush past him. "What a sly kid," Pascal's disappointed voice rang in the darkness. The moment Zen tore his armor open, Pascal had taken the necklace off. The blood jade necklace could cover a certain range, and Zen was virtually blind in the darkness. Since he solely relied on his spiritual sense for detection, he only intended to stab at the spot that his spiritual sense couldn't reach. With Pascal's cunning misdirection, Zen would inevitably miss his target. At that moment, Pascal had seized the chance to stab Zen from the other side with his long black spear. Pascal was a dishonorable, devious person to have used such a method to mislead Zen. If not for No 9527's reminder, the spear might have cut Zen's stomach open. Zen dodged the spear, but he was placed in a difficult spot. Pascal had returned the blood jade necklace to its original place around his neck. The broken armor was regenerated, and his broken wings were repaired. He began to crazily attack Zen, who was now at a disadvantage. A slight shake of his black wings sent black feathers, which were as sharp as knives, flying wildly toward Zen. Worse, Zen also had to dodge the spears that were constantly dropping overhead and rays of spear radiance that Pascal occasionally shot out. Even if Zen had activated the truth of cultivation nature and utilized the 8 smoky melodies to the limit, he was still in danger. Phew, a feather grazed past behind Zen, leaving a deep furrow on his back. Even with Zen's immense physical strength, he was incapable of resisting that type of black energy. As he registered the sharp pain in his back, Zen felt something cold touch his shoulder. His shoulder was pierced by a long spear. Zen knew he was in big trouble and his heart sank. He couldn't elude Pascal's attacks. His only consolation was that the black energy could not destroy his body like it did to the other people. But, if the attacks persisted, he would be torn to pieces by Pascal eventually. Chapter 2502, Sacrifice. Swish, Pascal flapped his wings again in the darkness. Countless feathers, as sharp as knives, swept toward Zen. Phew, 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 Zen's body jerked roughly in the air, and he let out a muffled groan. This time, 4 feathers had hit him. 3 of them grazed his shoulders and legs, and the other one pierced through his chest. Sword Chen and Rocher stood not far away. They tensed and clenched their fists when they heard Zen's pained groan. Zen may not be able to hold on like this. Sword Chen told Rocher through his life vitality. It was understandable that Zen's life mattered so much to them. After all, even though they went to the mountain of holy beings to become holy beings, protecting Zen had always been their priority. As Sword Chen finished speaking, he thrust forward to dodge the spears falling from above his head. He brandished his long sword to create a sword net and shrouded Pascal. Click, 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 his sword net could not destroy Pascal's armor. Pascal didn't even mind him. He just continued going after Zen. "Your method is useless," Rocher exclaimed in frustration. He closed his eyes and felt what was happening in the darkness. "What can we do? This is not the Abyss Demon region," Sword Chen said anxiously. If he was in the Abyss Demon region, he could use the force of primitive fear. However, even if Rosie lent all the force of primitive fear to him, it was still impossible to break Pascal's armor. The ice flowers of the girl can't transform the black energy. If it goes on like this, Zen will die. Rocher was also anxious. They were both worried, but they didn't know what to do next. Another muffled sound came from the darkness. Through his spiritual sense, Rocher could tell that blood was bursting out of Zen's body. "There's no other way. Let's pin Pascal down to buy some time for Zen," said Sword Chen. "No," Rocher refused. "What? Why?" Sword Chen was stunned. He was surprised that Rocher was not immediately on board with his plan. After they came out of the Abyss Demon region safely, his target, Nicholas, was dead. He also obtained a supreme treasure of belief. He thought that he accomplished his mission. And thus, he could continue his life and live happily with his wife, Iris. But now, he saw the danger that Zen was in, and suddenly, he realized that his mission was not completed. It was just delayed. His hand that held the soaring snake sword was trembling slightly. Although he kept calm, there were still tiny beads of sweat on his forehead. Zen, he said through his life vitality, could the reincarnation soul weapon really bring people back to life? Zen had trouble defending himself from Pascal. He had used all his skills. Number 9527 had also warned him that he must distance himself from Pascal. Otherwise, he would be killed despite his strong body. The reincarnation soul weapon can bring you back to life, and you will have your memory flame, but you will lose your cultivation. You have to start all over again. Why are you asking this? Zen explained while he was fighting. His eyes widened when he guessed what Rocher was planning. In turn, Rocher smiled wistfully. That's good. Please take care of Iris for me. I hope this is not the last time that we say goodbye to each other. What? Don't, Zen cried out. Just then, Rocher raised his soaring snake sword in the air. The blade of the sword began to glow. Just a few seconds ago, the valley was completely submerged in darkness. All of a sudden, a ray of luminous sword radiance broke through. It was like a candle that suddenly lit up the night. No matter how tiny it was, it instantly attracted everyone's attention. What skill is it? How could that guy break the darkness? What a unique aura. Some people that had been running turned their heads. They marveled at the sword light with odd expressions. Pascal also slowed down in astonishment. He turned his head too, and he stared at the sword light with widened eyes. How is this possible? The light extended from the tip of the sword to the hilt and then to Rocher's arm. Under the brightness of the light, Rocher's arm and body were petrified. The entire Divine Land had a total of more than 300,000 Ten Commandments slates, over 50,000 100 Commandments slates, over 8,000 Commandments slates, and one ruling slate. Although they were independent of each other, they formed a gigantic array which was one of the foundations of the Divine Land. No one could lay a finger on the foundations of the Divine Land, not the holy beings or the strong warriors at the other shore realm. Rocher was an exception. He inherited a part of Chiyu's legacy, which allowed him to devour the slates with the special power given by the soaring snake sword. He had devoured over 300 slates over the years, and that was his limit. The power of the rules contained in the slates was too much for him to bear. Chiyu didn't encourage the use of such power, because the price of releasing the power was one's own life. From the moment he devoured the first slate, he was destined to walk on a path of no return. Buzz. As the sword light blazed brighter and brighter, it turned into a small sun. It lit up the entire plain with a dazzling light. The soaring snake sword continued to extract Rocher's life energy. His shoulders, chest, neck, and even elixir field had turned into stones. At this moment, Rocher and the soaring snake sword had changed their positions. The sword seemed to come to life and was full of vitality, while Rocher had sacrificed his life to the sword. His energy was gradually weakening, and he slowly turned into a cold stone statue. Rocher. Zen's eyes widened in shock. He called out in alarm, as Rocher died in front of him. It was not until this moment that he finally understood why his father insisted on letting Rocher accompany him to the mountain of holy beings. Perhaps, Mike didn't want Rocher to become a holy being. He made such an arrangement because he had predicted a disaster would happen in the mountain. Splash. Rocher, who was now a stone man, brandished the sword with all his strength. His joints made a crisp sound, and his right arm was broken. He fell, like a bird with broken wings, out of the sky. Crack. The black ball that had floated above Rocher's head shot out black spears. They pierced through his body and made a cracking noise. Then, the black energy quickly annihilated his body. The golden light, as bright as the sun, rushed straight toward Pascal. At the sight of this, Pascal's face darkened. Although he trusted the power of the Abyss Demon region very much, the golden light in front of him had broken his limits. It had destroyed the strong darkness that he had cast. As he faced the sword attack, he had to let go of Zen. He needed to go all out to deal with it, or else he could die. Chapter 2503, Paying with Lives. Pascal waved a hand, causing a shallow whirlpool to appear within the black sphere in his right hand. As he extracted the power of the Abyss Demon region, the plane that had been illuminated by the sword light began to dim again. But Pascal knew that he could only suppress the light and not the power of the sword light. The energy in the black sphere surged as he pushed gently with his right hand. It rippled like countless tangled black snakes and headed straight for the sword light. Pascal thought Rocher's sword strike to be powerful, but the black energy would still absorb it. But the moment the black energy met the sword radiance, something strange happened. The golden sword light melted while the black energy kept extending. The golden light turned into something that resembled a spider's web and wrapped the black energy into its folds. It then moved towards Pascal at an incredible speed. By the time Pascal realized what was happening, the golden energy had already spread all over his body, its beams looking like a knitted net as they covered him. The black energy within the net had frozen, and was no longer under Pascal's control. Crack, 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 crack. No, Pascal roared. Samuel's voice boomed from outside the mountain of holy beings at the same time. That's impossible. I can control the abyss demon region. How could its power be rendered useless so easily? And by a mere consummate true god. Pascal's black armor, along with his wings, cracked and fell apart, revealing his body. His face was filled with utter disbelief. It was then that Zen pulled out a long sword and rushed towards Pascal. Phew! With a sound like that of a whistle, the blood jade necklace on Pascal's chest broke as the sword light flashed across it. The blood jade necklace was only a soul weapon, and although it was given by a yellow emperor guard, it had still been unable to withstand Zen's strike. Hurry up, now, Zen said. Before he could finish talking, number 9527 had entered Pascal's mind. Something that looked like a small bug lay at the back of Pascal's soul. It was the strand of soul from Samuel. This was the third time that Samuel had encountered no 9527 soul. The first two times, he had only felt pity that he lost control of Laquisha and Elena. After all, Laquisha and Elena weren't that important. But Pascal was different. Now, Samuel enjoyed a status that was superior to others and had the strength to challenge other Shore Realm warriors. All these were attributed to Pascal. Once Pascal was out of his control, Samuel would be forced to return to his original state. No, no, how dare you break my soul mark? Let me go, Samuel's soul fragment roared. Number 9527 didn't pay heed to him. To it, this holy being was no different from dust. A cyan light flashed and the bug formed by Samuel's strand of soul turned to ashes. Now that Pascal had lost the force that had been controlling him, his eyes rolled back into his head and he fell through the air. Before Pascal could land on the ground, Zen gently pulled at him. In a matter of moments, Zen had put Pascal's ownerless body into a small world. Buzz. Boom. The moment Pascal had lost consciousness, the black spheres floating over everyone's heads in the mountain of holy beings exploded and disappeared. The darkness that enveloped the divine land was erased, and the divine land was filled with light again. Outside the mountain of holy beings, Samuel's eyes seemed blank as he stared at the huge silver mountain before him. He was smart. He knew exactly what it meant. If he lost Pascal, he lost everything. Buzz. Layden stepped out of the void and asked, Samuel, how is the battle going at the mountain of holy beings? Did you kill Zen and the others? Samuel looked blankly at Layden and whispered, my soul mark. Zen has erased it. Layden's face darkened at this. Didn't I give you a blood jade necklace? Your soul mark was still erased. Despite that, there was another person who broke Pascal's defense, and Zen took the chance to cut off the necklace, Samuel said, his voice weak. Layden's eyebrows twitched and his hands bunched into fists before he punched Samuel square in the face. Samuel's body crashed to the ground, creating a large crater. You're trash. What's the point of us having you here? Layden barked coldly. The Yellow Emperor guards and Samuel were only taking advantage of each other. In theory, once Samuel had released the Yellow Emperor guards, he became useless to them. But Samuel controlled Pascal. With the power of the Abyss Demon region at his disposal, his strength could not be ignored. This was why the Yellow Emperor guards were still willing to support him after he had released them. And now, Zen had even taken Pascal away, which meant that to Layden, Samuel was nothing but trash. Inside the mountain of holy beings, Sword Chen was floating in the air, his eyes fixed on an arm close by. At one end of this arm was the soaring snake sword. The entire arm was cyan gray in color and had completely turned into a stone. That was Rocher's right arm. His body had been annihilated by the black energy, and this stone arm was his only limb that remained. Some distance away, some demi-holy beings and consummate true gods were staring at the long sword, a hint of greed in their eyes. This sword was definitely not an ordinary weapon. But no one dared rush forward and take the sword away, because Zen was already strolling towards it. The fight between him and Pascal had shocked everyone present. These two consummate true gods had shown strength that had completely surpassed that of holy beings. And the warriors present knew that they could not match up to them. Zen landed on the ground, and picked up the stone arm and the soaring snake sword. Even now, Rocher's hand still gripped the sword handle tightly. My father is a little selfish, Zen murmured. Mike had predicted that this would happen when he had given the soaring snake sword to Rocher. Mike knew Rocher would eventually sacrifice himself. With your talent, it will only take you a few decades to start over again and come back, and I will never let you die, Zen continued. He then pulled the soaring snake sword gently from Rocher's hand and put his broken arm into the space ring. He gazed calmly at the crowd and smiled before saying, I know what the Yellow Emperor guards have promised you. At these words, the soaring snake sword in Zen's hand shook and let out a clear, melodious sound. Zen continued, trying to sound indifferent, but Rocher will not die in vain. 11 people have attacked him before, and to them, I say, come out and offer your lives to the sword. This is what you have to pay for causing Rocher's death. Many people's hearts skipped a beat at Zen's words. In fact, when this group of people had rushed into the mountain of holy beings, most of them had intended to kill Zen, Sword Chen, and Rocher. Some had thought that their own strengths weren't powerful enough and had refrained from taking any action. Some others remained silent and decided to watch from the sidelines. Only a dozen people had attacked Rocher. Rocher had killed 3 of them, and then, the remaining 10-odd people didn't dare make a move again. Chapter 2504, The Holy Springs. Although these people had nothing to do with Rocher's death, Zen did not intend to let them get away this time. They had picked their side, now, they had to pay a price. After Zen finished speaking, the thunder wings on his back suddenly spread, and he charged toward the person closest to him. Run! 11 people broke away from the crowd and ran toward the valley. These people's hearts were full of regret because they allowed themselves to be fooled by Layton. Zen was so powerful that attacking the 3 of them was simply courting death. However, it was already too late for regrets. A young demi-holy being who was at the back of the group had only run over 100 feet when he felt a burning sensation above his head. As it turned out, a thin red lotus was coming at him. Spiritual energy gathering shield. With a wave of his hand, a large cyan shield appeared over his head. This huge shield, which had consumed nearly all of his internal momentum, could block the all-out blow from a holy being. Unfortunately, his opponent now was Zen. The moment the red lotus touched the huge shield, the energy of the whole cyan shield changed, and the shield transformed into a red lotus covering the young man. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the young demi-holy being was incinerated to ashes. The remaining 10 was stupefied at the sight. That young man was a demi-holy being from a first-tier clan. He was among the top demi-holy beings from outside the floating islands. Even so, he could not withstand the least of Zen's attacks. Thus, the others would definitely be slaughtered. Zen did not stop after killing the first young demi-holy being. He flew toward the next target with his thunder wings. When the second demi-holy being saw Zen coming straight at him, he panicked, shouting, I don't know anything. I mean no harm. You mean no harm now, but when you attacked us, this was not what you thought, Zen replied faintly. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. With one roll of the red lotus, the demi-holy being was also consumed. When the remaining 9 people saw this, their hearts sank. An old man gritted his teeth and said, we won't be able to make it out alive this way. Let's join forces and fight him with all our might. These demi-holy beings were smart. They knew that they would die before reaching the end of the valley because they were still far from it, and Zen killed fast. Since they would never survive anyway, it was worth a shot. The 9 demi-holy beings abruptly halted. Pressured by their debilitating fear, they all burst forth with surprising power, exerting all of their internal momentum and the most powerful skills. With their cooperation, even the holy beings would have a hard time fending off their attack. Any holy beings who had experienced the battle in the Abyss Demon region would have shaken their heads at this scene. The joint attack might have worked on others, but not on Zen or Rocher. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A cacophony of sounds rang out, and numerous thunderbolts and ice spears shot toward Zen at the same time. These various Thurgies maximized their internal momentum, but all were transformed into red lotuses before they reached Zen. As Zen couldn't establish a connection with Rocher now, there could have been a way out of their predicament through their cooperation, because the energy that the red-eyed girl could absorb and transform was limited. However, the joint forces of the 9 demi-holy beings were not enough to reach her limit. Splash! All of the Thurgies that came to attack Zen were transformed without ceasing until, finally, there were hundreds of red lotuses. With a gentle push of Zen's hand, the red lotuses hurtled through the valley, and the demi-holy beings blocking their path turned into ashes upon contact. Upon seeing Zen's return, the other people on the plain remained silent. Many of them had been tempted to make a move, but now they were secretly glad that they did not provoke Zen. When Zen arrived at the plain, his gaze once again fell on Alfredo. Under Zen's cold regard, Alfredo's body trembled violently. He was a member of the Han clan, and he held a grudge against Zen. It wasn't difficult for Zen to kill him now. However, Zen only cast an indifferent glance at him without saying anything. As Alfredo heaved a sigh of relief, he heard Zen's voice. Your life was spared for Kelsey's sake. If you understood the situation, then you would leave the Han clan with Kelsey immediately after leaving the Mountain of Holy Beings. Alfredo had not given that course of action much thought, but after hearing what Zen said, he thought twice and quickly made a decision. With Samuel being of no use, the Han clan was met by a catastrophe. Zen didn't say anything, he silently stared at the plain ahead, thinking about Rocher's reincarnation. For such a secondary creature like Rocher, the memory flame in the Divine Land was incomplete. It was not capable of restoring Rocher's memories in the evolutionary universe. What Zen could see were Rocher's memories after he had entered the Divine Land. In other words, if Rocher was reborn, his memory would be incomplete. Considering that his father, Mike, was the master of the evolutionary universe, Zen wondered whether it was possible for him to retrieve Rocher's lost memories. At that point, Zen was incapable of doing this to the creatures in his inner world. He could easily know anything happened anywhere and at any point in time within his inner world, but he still couldn't extract creatures' memories. However, his inner world wasn't as perfect as the universe. He hoped that his father could grant his friend's memories a complete recovery. As Zen was lost in thought, Sword Chen approached him. With his eyes staring into the distance, he said, "Something has changed on the plain." Zen looked into the distance and saw rays of light rising from the surface of the plain, emitting a vast expanse of silver light. In the depths of the plain, several silver ribbon-like things streamed up to the sky like fountains. The holy springs have appeared. I didn't expect that there would be 5 holy springs this time. How come there are so many of them? These demi-holy beings and consummate true gods were still thinking of the chance to become a holy being. Zen and Sword Chen were not the sort of men that they could challenge. If only 1 or 2 holy springs had appeared, their chances would have been nil because there was no way for them to succeed against Zen in battle. However, everyone was surprised to witness 5 holy springs burst forth in the Mountain of Holy Beings. Every holy spring meant an opportunity for someone to become a holy being, and Zen and Sword Chen only needed 2 of the springs. This meant that 3 holy springs were available for the rest of them to fight for. Let's go. Zen leapt slightly and flew toward one of the holy springs. Watching him, Sword Chen nodded and selected another holy spring a bit far away from Zen's. The others consciously avoided the 2 holy springs that were selected and decided to fight with all their might for the other 3 holy springs. Chapter 2505, Fight for the Holy Springs. Each time the Mountain of Holy Beings came, a disaster would dawn on the demi-holy beings and the consummate true gods. In order to fight for a holy spring, everyone would spare no effort. Anyone who would reach the consummation of true god realm was by no means ordinary. As they knew that they only needed to go one step further to reach the peak of the world, the attraction was irresistible to them. Flying his way to reach the holy spring, Zen could already see how it was getting closer to him. Splash! Like mercury, the shiny silver water came out of the holy spring. However, mercury was viscous, while the silver water flowed quickly. Flowing down the ground, the silver water rushed to the center of the spring on a low terrain, quickly forming a silver pool. Sauntering towards it, Zen was now 1,000 feet away from the holy spring. Suddenly, the surface of the pool fluctuated. Rumble! Bubbles started to appear on top of the silver pool. A few moments later, a silver head came out of the water, followed by neck, body and legs. Soon, a complete human body rose from the spring water. Leaving the pool, it rushed straight towards Zen. Is this the test of the holy spring? Zen tried his best to remain calm. He knew that to occupy a holy spring, one had to be ready to fight both the other challengers and the holy spring itself. Seeing the silver man coming straight for him, Zen didn't even need to dodge. With a flick of his finger, a red lotus bloomed from his fingertip, immediately sweeping towards the silver man. If the silver man was made of energy, the attack of the red lotus should do the trick. With the red lotus wrapping all over its body, the silver man didn't seem worried. Stretching out its hand, it tore the red lotus off. It can't be transformed. With this conclusion, Zen's eyes narrowed slightly. It seemed that the silver man's strength was coming from the body of the Mountain of Holy Beings. The Mountain of Holy Beings had been here for countless years, but neither holy beings nor warriors at the other shore realm were able to enter it. Maybe it was because it contained an unbeatable treasure, or it was an extremely powerful treasure on its own. Seeing Zen was lost in his thoughts, the silver man jumped up and rushed towards Zen with a fist. Phew! The fist came at utmost speed that exceeded Zen's expectations, the space around it faintly showing signs of cracking. Seeing the silver fist coming for him, Zen punched it without dodging. He had extracted most of his strength, with a flash of 9 stars in his body. Bang! A strange color flashed across Zen's eyes as he endured the attack, urging him to take a step back. He then flew backward. In the battle requiring pure strength, he was actually at a disadvantage. However, the impact had his fist glowing with a layer of golden light. A stream of mysterious truth of godly way was released by the golden light. Even number 9527 couldn't explain where it came from. Although the impact was strong enough to send Zen flying, his golden light curled the silver man and sliced it into several pieces instantly like a high-speed sharp sword. Splash! The pieces of the silver man immediately turned into silver water and converged in the pool. Standing still in the air, Zen clenched his numb fist. As he approached the pool again, he could see 2 silver men crawling out of the water. Their bodies were embedded with a layer of armor, making them much stronger than the first one. Like the first attacker, they rushed quickly towards Zen. On the other side, Sword Chen looked cautious. Although no one fought with him for the Holy Spring, he knew it wasn't easy to obtain it. Just like Zen's case, a silver man climbed out from beneath the Holy Spring when he approached it. But this time, the silver man was holding a long silver sword in its hand. The silver man was not as mighty as the one that Zen had encountered, but it had excellent swordsmanship. Buzz! As the silver man gently lifted its silver sword, a stream of silver sword radiance turned into a fine net and enveloped Sword Chen. The emotion closing godly way. Sword Chen's eyes narrowed slightly before they went dark. Slashing his long sword in the air, he created a sword net to cover the silver man. The 2 sword nets collided. Immediately cutting off each other, the well-arranged sword nets turned into messy sword threads. The expression on Sword Chen's face changed slightly as he observed what happened. These messy sword threads were irregular, making it more difficult for him to dodge them. Jumping to a somersault, he tried to dodge through the gaps in between, but one of the sword threads cut his body, leaving a long and narrow wound on his abdomen. On the other hand, the silver man was directly cut by several sword threads. Half of its head rolled into the silver pool, while its whole body melted. But before Sword Chen could let out a sigh of relief, another 2 silver men appeared from the pool, each holding a sword in their hands. The situation was much more tragic around the other 3 holy springs. Whenever the warriors approached the holy springs, a certain number of silver men appeared to face them. If 10 demi-holy beings approached a holy spring, then 10 silver men would come out of it to meet them. The appearance of the silver men was actually not much of a big problem. However, since the demi-holy beings and consummate true gods would fight each other for the holy springs, that added up to the problem. Bang! Bro, please help me. If I succeed in becoming a holy being, I will never forget your kindness. A middle-aged man emitted a freezing aura. In front of him, a huge ice wall was erected. Countless ice spikes released by the silver man flew over from the other side of the ice wall. From a distance, a burly man sneered, "How about you help me become a holy being, and I will repay your kindness." After becoming holy beings, they would be able to join the powerful clans. In fact, this was the ultimate goal of most of the strong warriors in the Divine Land. No one was willing to give up so easily. No need to argue. You both can just go to perdition. This holy spring belongs to me. A demi-holy being from the Qin clan answered. By nature, the demi-holy beings of the great clans were more powerful than the ordinary ones, so they were more domineering. The facial expressions of the first 2 warriors changed at those words. Quickly coming into an agreement, they gave up on getting close to the holy spring, and started moving towards the demi-holy being of the Qin clan. The fights continued around the 3 holy springs. Some warriors died after being attacked by several others, while some had been injured and had to temporarily retreat to the side. After healing their wounds, they charged again to join the chaotic battle. During the fight happening in the Mountain of Holy Beings, a flying ship rushed out swiftly from the huge chaos clouds. Without the chaos clouds blocking their view, Clement and his group could see more clearly. "At last, we finally get out of that mess," sighed Clement. "Watch out, there is something ahead," warned Godfrey. Narrowing his eyes, Clement stared at the gem-shaped thing floating in the air. Chapter 2506, Bathe in the Holy Spring. From the viewpoint of the Yellow Emperor guards, the Divine Land looked as if it was only a little bit larger than a grain of sand. But, nestled in the middle of a grayish-brown, it remained a sight to behold. "Look at that beauty," Godfrey exclaimed as he stared at the vast divine land before him. Chiyu took a lot of efforts to create this world, Clement remarked nonchalantly. Of course it won't be ordinary. Another person assessed the distance between them and the divine land. With the current speed of the trumpet-flying ship, he concluded, we'd need roughly 5 days to reach it. The vastness of the chaos was intense. While the divine land was already at their line of sight, it would still take them a while to reach it. Everyone, get ready, Clement announced. We may need to face fierce battles after 5 days. How many divine crystals do we have on this trumpet-flying ship? Around 300, Godfrey reported. That's enough for us to return. Use all these divine crystals to prepare the slaughtering moonlight array, Clement ordered. The Yellow Emperor guards exchanged surprised glances. Godfrey was the one to say what was on everyone's minds. If we consume all of the divine crystals, he started. How are we going to go back? We don't need the slaughtering moonlight array to kill those other shore realm warriors, do we? Clement shook his head. Do as what I said. Just to be on the safe side. I have the feeling that we'll have a tough battle ahead of us. Besides, if we successfully occupy the divine land, it would have the resources we need to return. Even without the trumpet-flying ship, they could still return to the source world. It would just take a longer time. Meanwhile, in the mountain of holy beings, Zen was rushing towards the silver water pool again. This time, 10 figures emerged from the water. The 10 silver men were of great power, yet they were unable to cause any substantial damage to Zen. Golden light shot out of Zen's body and it tore the silver men into pieces. It took several rounds for Zen to realize that the fighting strategy of the silver men in the holy spring was the same as that of the person who attacked them. For one, the silver men used swords to attack Sword Chen just as what he did. And the godly way they used was exactly the same as Sword Chen's. Zen relied on his fists and own strength to fight the silver men and, similarly, the silver men dealt with him only with brute force. The other demi-holy beings and the consummate true gods also knew this, but they did not hesitate to use their most powerful skills against these silver men. They knew full well that their bodies weren't as tough as Zen's. If they relied only on their fists and own strength to fight the silver men all at the same time, they would sure be shattered to pieces. Zen, on the other hand, only relied on the golden light that contained truth of godly way in the surface of his body. However, the silver men were unable to use the truth of godly way which Zen's body generated. With this technique, it was much easier for Zen to deal with them. Zen was smart enough not to use a sword. The silver men could also blend the godly ways, even if they couldn't use the truth of godly way that Zen employed. The 3,000 godly ways existed in the divine land, after all. He had the option of holding the soaring snake sword and using the theurgy of blending the godly ways to combat the silver men, but that could put him in trouble. Even Zen couldn't resist the backlash of the ways' blending energy. Once more, he rushed to the silver pool and was thrown by the backlash of his attack that shattered his enemies to pieces. This went on over and over again. Each time they disintegrated, the silver men would reappear in more numbers in the next round. When they reached 30 and Zen was able to crush them once more, the water finally calmed down as the silver men were unable to regenerate. I did it, Zen said triumphantly. In the middle of the pool, silver water gushed out. As far as Zen knew, he only needed to bathe in the holy spring. Zen made his way to the middle of the holy spring. Not far away, several consummate true gods gave up the fight. They had already lost their arms, broken their legs, or were badly injured. They stared at the holy springs ahead of them in defeat. They had to face powerful silver men and, potentially, sneak attacks from some demi-holy beings when they rushed for the chance to bathe in the holy springs. Unfortunately, they were too weak to continue. If they weren't careful enough, they would end up dead. Haha, on the side of a holy spring, a demi-holy being could be seen fighting 3 silver men when something cold brushed past the demi-holy being's back. It was an ice sword that cut across his head. The demi-holy being's head flew to the sky as the ice sword shot a beam of cold light. As soon as the cold light hit the head, a fist landed on the head, and it immediately turned into shards of ice. The one who made the attack was a consummate true god from the Leng clan, Glendon Leng. Glendon Leng was not well known on the floating islands, but he had astounding power and strength. When the alliance of powerful clans on the floating islands explored the Abyss Demon region not too long ago, he had explored the north of the Divine Land alone and conquered a second-grade forbidden land, the Dream Ice Plain, where he found the Ice Sword, a second-grade supreme treasure of belief. Glendon killed another person. He's already responsible for 9 deaths. How could it be so easy for a consummate true god to kill a demi-holy being? Glendon is so strong. What's the big deal of it? No one would dare provoke the two that monopolize the holy springs over there, after all. The two people the man referred to were Zen and Sword Chen. The people who decided to sit by the sidelines and give up on the fight let out a collective sigh. They wanted to become holy beings, but they were too weak and they were not ready to sacrifice their lives for nothing. As soon as Glendon Lang was sure that the demi-holy being was dead, he snuck to the other demi-holy being. It was Leland. Leland was standing by the other side of the holy spring. His body lit with colorful lights as he moved steady towards the holy spring. His speed of approaching the holy spring was rather fast as he now was faced with 6 silver men. The moment Glendon Lang rushed over, he felt a chill. Leland was trained to be more vigilant than ordinary demi-holy beings, thanks to his experience in the Abyss Demon region. As soon as he felt the chill, he bent down. Because of his quick response, the ice sword missed his scalp by a short distance. Glendon Lang clenched his fist in frustration. He had failed to hit Leland with his sword strike. He breathed deeply and decided to strike again. However, Leland was already floating backward and had avoided the second sword strike from Glendon Lang. At the same time, he quickly distanced himself from the holy spring. Glendon Lang didn't chase after him. Leland wasn't his primary target anyway. His goal was to kill all the competitors so that he could bathe in the holy spring in peace. Leland successfully retreated to 1,000 feet away. He looked at the scene and smiled bitterly. These disciples of the powerful clans are too aggressive, he thought to himself. Just then, Leland heard someone cry loudly close by. Look, Zen moved so fast. He has started bathing in the holy spring. Another holy being is about to be born. Holy garbage. His strength has already surpassed that of a holy being. He deserves to gain the title of a holy being. People talked among themselves with eyes full of envy. Then, the envy in their eyes disappeared as soon as they all realized something. Something's wrong, someone finally said. It seems like the holy spring failed to integrate into Zen's body. That's strange. Chapter 2507, Giving Up the Holy Spring. Zen stood still inside the holy spring, letting his body gently soak in the silver spring water. His attention was not on the spring water itself, but on why Chiyu had arranged such a test in the first place. If the Yellow Emperor guards hadn't killed anyone from the Nine Li race all those years ago, would the Nine Li people still have had to kill each other like this in order to become holy beings? Anyone who had reached the consummation of true God realm could be considered useful in the Nine Li race. They were the hopes for the future. As soon as this thought came to his mind, Zen patted his head and realized that he had made a big mistake. If the Nine Li people were still alive, they would have been a whole. In that case, this many people wouldn't be able to enter the mountain of holy beings, and there wouldn't be such a cruel competition. The holy springs were only a test. Splash. After that realization, Zen continued to bathe in the holy spring, but he soon discovered something wrong. Before entering the mountain of holy beings, he had been told that all he needed to do was occupy a holy spring, which was not a difficult task for him. Then, as he bathed in the holy spring, the spring water was supposed to enter his elixir field and merge with his inner world. However, the spring water wasn't entering his body at all. It just gathered around his body and slid down his skin like ordinary spring water. He felt as if he was taking a bath. The spring water isn't entering my body. What's going on? A strange expression appeared on Zen's face. Number 9527, do you know what's going on? He asked. Number 9527 thought for a moment and then said, the role of the rebirth land is to connect your life to it. The holy spring can help you build a rebirth land. Since it seems to be incompatible with you, it means that you can't connect your life to a rebirth land. The explanation was quite easy to understand, but a helpless expression came over Zen's face. There must be a reason, he cried. After thinking for a while, number 9527 shook its head and said, who knows what the reason is? Maybe the holy spring doesn't like you. Zen was rendered speechless. He pursed his lips with an expression of dismay. My father built the evolutionary universe. Why can't I build my own universe? Thinking of this, Zen sat down cross-legged and gently extended his hand to lead the spring water to his abdomen. He intended to forcefully drive the spring water into his inner world. However, as soon as the silver spring water touched his elixir field, it flew back. It seemed as if his inner world and the spring water were repelling each other. How could this be? Zen frowned. Don't be sad. Although the rebirth land can give you the opportunity to be reborn, it comes at a price. You know what, I am much more interested in the original will of the mountain of holy beings, said number 9527. Both number 9527 and the strong warriors at the other shore realm seemed to have nothing but disdain for the rebirth land. Despite what number 9527 said, Zen continued to give it a try. But to his disappointment, he was unable to merge with the spring water no matter how much he tried. This meant that he couldn't become a holy being at all. If he hadn't experienced it himself, he wouldn't have believed that such a strange thing would happen to him. His face turned sullen. Seeing Sword Chen still fighting with the silver men, he sighed in his heart. Then, his eyes swept over the others and spotted Leland. A dozen people were still fighting for a holy spring, but Leland had already retreated. He wasn't strong enough to fight against the others. Zen thought for a moment, and then said to Leland through his chaotic energy, "Leland, come to my holy spring." In fact, Leland and the others had been stealing glances at Zen all along with hopeful thoughts swirling inside their heads. If Zen really couldn't merge with the holy spring, it would mean a chance for them. The more time Zen took, the more the wheels had churned in their heads. They had all wondered how they could get Zen to readily agree to hand the holy spring over to them. Leland had also had such thoughts, but he had quickly dispelled them. Although he and Zen were old friends, their friendship was not that deep. Would Zen give away the holy spring to me? No, I'm afraid it's just wishful thinking, Leland thought to himself. But just at this moment, Zen spoke to him through his chaotic energy, making his heart throb and his body tremble. He looked at Zen in disbelief. Even the voice that came from his own life vitality trembled as he asked, "You mean you want me to take up this holy spring?" "That's right. It seems that I can't build my rebirth land. Come, if you will," Zen said, shrugging his shoulders. Leland didn't know what the rebirth land meant. He only knew that Zen genuinely intended to give the holy spring to him. For a while, he was unable to believe what was happening, but then he abruptly turned into a gust of wind and flew toward Zen. When the others saw what Leland was doing, their eyes flashed with understanding and they sprang to action. They didn't know what Leland had said to Zen, but they were confident that they could win Zen over too. Some of them were much faster than Leland. "Zen Luo, I have a third-grade supreme treasure of belief at home. If you give me the holy spring, I will present the treasure to you in return. I will not retract my words. Believe me. I have an amazing theurgy learned from my ancestors." These people were racking their brains to list the best things they had, trying their best to win Zen's favor. When Leland heard these words, he was stunned. He had nothing to offer Zen in exchange for the holy spring, so he stopped midway, afraid that Zen would change his mind and give the holy spring to someone else. After the warriors had all finished speaking, Zen asked nonchalantly, "What are your treasures compared with the title of a holy being?" One of them thought for a moment and replied, "They are nothing at all." "So I'm not interested," Zen said in a matter-of-fact tone. "But my supreme treasure of belief. The group became anxious at once. Who would be willing to give up such a good opportunity? However, Zen's annoyance was rising. His face darkened, and a cold aura suddenly shot out from him. "I have given this holy spring to Leland. You all should leave, otherwise, don't blame me for what happens next." Seeing that Zen was angry, the crowd went silent. They reluctantly left, casting longing glances at the holy spring. Leland, on the other hand, felt very much indebted to Zen. It had never occurred to him that the journey to the Abyss Demon region could bring him the opportunity to be a holy being. In no time, his clan would join the powerful clans on the floating islands. Without any hesitation, Leland rushed toward the holy spring, and Zen retreated. However, Leland still had to face the test of the silver men. The moment he approached the holy spring, 6 silver men appeared in the pool just like before. After Zen withdrew from the holy spring, he did not go to look for the maze. After leaving the Abyss Demon region, Sword Chen had been unable to use the force of primitive fear. With his current strength, he might not be able to go up against a group of demi-holy beings if they decided to besiege him. So, Zen intended to stay here until Sword Chen finished bathing in the holy spring. Chapter 2508, The Maze. Occupying a holy spring was not an easy task. In fact, it would not be easy for Sword Chen to rush into the spring even if there was nothing to interfere with him. The stronger one was, the fiercer the holy spring's counterattack would be. After 4 hours, he took a quick break and then resumed to attack the holy spring again. Sword Chen was fortunate enough that no one dared to fight with him to compete for the holy spring, making him feel more relaxed. Finally, after half a day of fighting, he passed the test of the holy spring. All the fighting had hurt him badly, but after passing the test, he didn't mind the wounds at all. To him, if he could make it and become a holy being, then all his efforts would not be in vain. Meanwhile, cupping his hands joyfully at Zen, he walked towards the holy spring. At that moment, the silver holy spring water suddenly poured out of the spring and started to wash his body. While bathing in the holy spring, Zen noticed that the spring water couldn't penetrate his body, let alone enter his inner world. However, this was a different case for Sword Chen as the silver water continuously merged into his body, flowing along his meridians and reuniting in his elixir field. Not long after, he was transformed into a shiny, silver man. Sword Chen shining with utmost luster attracted a lot of people's attention. The holy spring water continued to gather, and a stream of silver water suddenly appeared on Sword Chen's head. Whoosh! Immediately, the silver water soared into the sky, which then vanished into thin air. Meanwhile, a strong and sudden space fluctuation came from the divine land. Soon after, a thunder-like roar spread throughout the divine land. This sound of thunder, however, resembled that of a collapsing universe. But the people from the divine land had also made it clear that ever since the mountain of holy beings had appeared, the sound could also mean that some holy being was creating their universe. Another warrior has become a holy being. I wonder who it is this time. It's so fast that someone has become a holy being, much faster than the previous times. The mountain of holy beings has not even been opened for one day, and yet that holy being's universe has already been built. Having felt the movement from their feet, the disciples in the floating islands were filled with envy. From that day forward, there would be another powerful clan that would rise above the time sea. Meanwhile, somewhere in the divine land, Estelle raised her head and looked at the vast sky. Blinking her light brown eyes, she asked, "Who do you think has become a holy being?" Thinking for a while, Holy J replied, "Zen, maybe." Nodding, Estelle responded, "I hope that all of them can make it. It would take a long time to construct a universe." Crossing his legs, Sword Chen sat in the holy spring. The water continuously went into his elixir field, merging with his inner world and occasionally shooting from his head and into the sky. On the other hand, in a certain sky of the divine land, a ball of silver light was rapidly expanding. And this silver light was the core of the universe. It took a long time for the core of the universe to mature, and that would take place after a holy being left the mountain of holy beings. It usually took several thousand years for a holy being to consolidate their own cultivation. Meanwhile, on the other side, Liyuan's test was also about to come to an end. Sword Chen's big noise in becoming a holy being did not bother him at all, for it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and he should not screw it up. With that, the fight for the remaining 3 holy springs also became very fiery. Most of the weaker demi-holy beings and consummate true gods had already withdrawn from the competition for the remaining 3 holy springs, but this didn't mean that they had really given up. If they had the chance, they would naturally seize the opportunity. All the people who were left to contend for the 3 holy springs were elites among the demi-holy beings. They not only had to be on guard against each other's sneak attack, but also had to face the test from the holy springs. With their progress naturally being very slow, it appeared that no one could make it in a short time. Soon after, Liyuan finally passed the test of the holy spring and began to bathe in it. Blinking his eyes, Zen looked towards the end of the plain. Lightly tapping his toes, he flew up, leaving the holy springs behind. As soon as Zen left the place, some of the people in the area noticed what he was doing and cast a cunning and pitiful look at him. Ah, how could that be? Zen is so powerful and yet the holy spring doesn't approve him. What a pity that such a good opportunity is wasted. He looks calm and indifferent. But I can tell that he must be pretending. Poor Zen. Deep inside, he must be crying. Disappointed, Zen could not deny the sadness on his face that he was unable to become a holy being. But after all, compared with the people from the divine land, he was a man of a broader outlook. And besides, number 9527 didn't take this place seriously. So Zen wasn't that sad like the other people had assumed. Ever since he entered the mountain of holy beings, the infinity ruler in his mind kept on pointing to the end of the plain. Zen didn't know how big this place was, so he flew in the direction that the infinity ruler directed him to. About an hour later, he finally saw silver mountains at the end of the plain. Just like the entrance, there was also a valley at the end of the plain. After entering the valley, Zen continued to go forward, but soon found that the valley was a dead end, and the entrance of a maze he imagined did not appear. How could this be? The infinity ruler led me to this place. Zen's brows creased slightly in confusion. He moved a few steps, and the infinity ruler rolled lightly in his mind again. Afterwards, he looked at a silver mountain wall not far away. The flickering light on the mountain wall was brighter than that on the surrounding walls. It was difficult to notice it without looking carefully. Is it here? Zen rushed towards the mountain wall without hesitation. As soon as he came into contact with the mountain wall, silver light flashed in front of him and he was inside the mountain. In front of him was a long and dark corridor. Wow, it is indeed the entrance of the maze. A helpless smile appeared on Zen's face. The entrance to the maze had always been located in the mountain of holy beings, and for so many divine eras, countless consummate true gods and demi-holy beings had come into the mountain of holy beings. There must have been someone exploring the internal space of the mountain of holy beings in curiosity, and someone must have found the valley that existed at the other end of the plain. However, only Bromley had found the entrance to the maze. He must have entered the maze accidentally. Observing the place for a short while, Zen continued to walk forward along the passageway of the maze. After he turned 2 corners along the passageway, a familiar feeling came into being. When he was at the end of the true path, he passed through a similar maze which was created by Bromley. That maze was a copy of this one. Back then, Bromley had walked through the maze for quite a while, but he found that he couldn't pass the maze, so he had no choice but to leave. Zen, on the other hand, was different. Every time he took a turn in the maze, the infinity ruler in his mind would show him the right path. And if he faced 2 or 3 crossings, he could still make the right choice with the help of the infinity ruler. After a couple of turns, Zen moved smoothly through the maze with the help of the infinity ruler. Chapter 2509, An Approaching Flying Ship. The silence in the maze was deafening. Zen could not hear any other sounds aside from his own footsteps. Zen initially started walking quickly. But after realizing how large the maze was, he lightly tapped the tip of his toe and flew away. However, the terribly large maze was still beyond Zen's imagination. Even after traveling through it the entire day and night, he still could not see the exit. The days seemed never-ending inside the maze. On the 3rd day, Zen walked along a black passageway, hoping to reach the end. After turning a corner, he was surprised to notice that the passageway in front of him suddenly changed. The walls on both sides of the passageway were shining with a colorful light. The fragments of time, Zen couldn't help assuming, feeling an intense aura of the time law from the walls. It was exactly the same aura he felt from the time sea. Tapping the fragments on the wall gently, he found nothing unusual. However, as Zen continued to move forward, he faintly heard a soft breath near his ears. Phew, phew, it appeared like someone was sleeping in the maze. Moreover, the sound of breathing echoed in Zen's ears, making him think he was getting closer to this person's location. Frowning slightly, Zen flew away along the passageway. He wanted to find out the source of the breathing. After rushing tens of thousands of feet, he could still hear the breathing sound floating in his ears. It sounded like it was still by his side, even though he had already traveled so far. Even with the strange feeling in his heart, he still bit the bullet and continued his way. On the other hand, Emily sat on the top of the divine land and looked up at the vast chaos. She had missed the days in the source world a lot of times. But after she had managed to flee from the prison, she got eaten up by depression. After opening the barrier of the divine land, she should be able to return to the source world. Looking afar, she wondered how the Rose sect was doing right now. If the leader of a sect went missing or dead, the sect members were expected to select a new leader. If she returned to the source world, the position of the sect leader would probably be lost. But that was not something that made Emily worry. She was more concerned about her disciples and her clan members. Gazing into the chaos, she saw a faint cyan light from a distance. It was almost negligible from where she sat. However, the speed at which the cyan light was traveling stirred Emily's vigilance. That thing was closing in too fast, and it was coming straight towards the divine land. Standing up slowly, Emily called out a warning. Something is coming. Seeing the cautious look on Emily's face, everyone was alerted. There weren't many creatures wandering around in the chaos, but each of them was extremely powerful. Even a warrior at the other shore realm had to be careful when facing them. How fast! Exclaimed Leopold, staring straight ahead. A woman with black hair from the snake goddess race came to look as well. Stretching out her finger and putting it on her eyelid, she gently spit out a single word, reveal. One of her eyes flashed with a strange luster, while the other one started blinking. Soon, her face reflected a strange expression as she explained, "That's not a living creature." "Then what is it?" Emily asked. "A flying ship," the black-haired woman answered in a serious tone. Everyone's expression changed slightly when they heard the words. Flying ships were common in the source world, but not in this place. This was the place on the edge of chaos. Who would have been so bored to go to the edge of the chaos? Besides, the flying ship was very close to where they were. Judging by how it was swiftly moving, the people inside that ship must have marked the divine land as their target. Walking over to where Emily was, Timotheus looked at her and asked, "What do you think?" Shaking her head, Emily answered, "I don't know what their purpose is. No matter what that is, once they discover the divine land, the situation will be very troublesome," Timotheus commented with a frown. Knowing the current situation of the Nine Li race, Timotheus and the others were certain they couldn't let anyone know about the existence of the divine land. Thus, Timotheus felt concerned. What if people from the source world found about it? Emily smiled faintly. "If their strength is ordinary, just let them come. It's not a big deal." Timotheus nodded, confirming his agreement. Lorena, Mike, Moon and the holy beings of the Sword Clan gathered together. Lorena was unable to hide her worried expression the entire time. "I don't know if Zen has succeeded in becoming a holy being." On the other hand, Mike remained very calm. As long as Zen is in the mountain of holy beings, the biggest difficulty has been solved. It doesn't matter whether he can become a holy being or not, but remembering his prediction based on his evolution godly way, he knew that there would be danger outside the divine land. But there was nothing in the chaos except for them. He couldn't understand why his prediction suggested an upcoming danger. All of a sudden, Timotheus approached and announced lightly, "We need to hide." All the holy beings looked at him with a confused expression. "Why?" Lorena asked. Cupping his hands, Timotheus faced Lorena and answered, "There is a flying ship coming towards the divine land. We can't tell if it's an enemy or a friend. You need to leave and stay away to be safe, Princess Lorena." A flying ship? Lorena frowned upon hearing the news. Mike's face darkened when he heard of this, realizing that it might have something to do with his prediction. Since it was not a good thing to have outsiders at this critical moment, he asked, "Where is it now?" Timotheus pointed to afar, making everyone look in the same direction. They saw the cyan light approaching quickly. "For your safety, Princess Lorena, please enter the small world I have prepared," Timotheus recommended. However, Lorena declined, shaking her head mildly. "I won't go into the small world." Timotheus tried to persuade her, but Lorena insisted on staying. In the end, he had to give up. Though it was true that hiding in the small world, or their inner worlds, would guarantee their safety, they would know nothing about the outside world. In fact, it was not only Lorena who was reluctant to enter the small world, but also the other holy beings. "If that will be the case, I'll have Ramsey make an array to hide us," said Timotheus. The time flew slowly while they waited. 4 hours later, the trumpet flying ship was very close to the divine land. In front of Godfrey, a small jade plate floated in the air, and he was holding a light cyan crystal. Known to contain an astonishing amount of energy, this crystal was so called the divine crystal, and was widely used in the source world. After gently flipping the divine crystal, he placed it on the jade plate, allowing it to sink into the plate. "The last divine crystal has been set," Godfrey reported. "According to the Yellow Emperor guards in the Divine Land, the 9 Li guards are at the top of the Divine Land, but we haven't come across any of them yet," another Yellow Emperor guard said. Looking leisurely at the large Divine Land in front of him, Clement was in his best mood. In a light voice, he ordered, "First, activate the slaughtering moonlight array. Then we will descend." Chapter 2510, Searching for Space Fluctuations. Following Clement's command, Godfrey gently pressed the jade plate in his hand. A bright crescent appeared on the jade plate. Soon after, an invisible wave spread out, covering a large area around them. "The slaughtering moonlight array has been activated," reported Godfrey. Clement nodded leisurely. The flying ship floating in the sky slowly descended and finally landed on the peak point of the divine land. Crack! Clement jumped off the flying ship in relief and glanced around. The peak point of the divine land was actually flat, and everything within his sight was extremely desolate. The Yellow Emperor guard who jumped down right after him said, "The divine land is much larger than I imagined." "Well, it's a world that Chiyu created, after all," Clement said flatly. Then, he squatted down and lightly knocked on the ground. After a few moments, he suddenly leapt up into the air, conjuring up a bright scarlet rune in his hand. As he came back down, he slapped the scarlet rune hard on the ground. Bang! The moment the scarlet rune touched the ground, a ring of scarlet light spread out from the center of his palm with a dull buzzing noise. The peak of the divine land trembled for a moment. Buzz! At that moment, a triangular shield quietly appeared on the surface of the divine land. "What's this?" Clement asked, frowning and staring at the shield at his feet. "What a powerful treasure, Master Clement, even you failed to break this with your full strength," Godfrey exclaimed. He couldn't believe his eyes. The other Yellow Emperor guards could sense the power of this shield, but they shook their heads in response to Clement's question. They didn't know the origin of this treasure either. However, a relatively young Yellow Emperor guard who was standing at the rear thought about it for a while before he said, "I heard that Chiyu had a supreme treasure, the Heavenly Mirror Shield. It is supposed to be in the shape of a triangle, and it is said that it can't be destroyed by any force in the world. Is this the Heavenly Mirror Shield?" Clement looked at this Yellow Emperor guard in surprise and asked, "Abbas, are you sure?" The Yellow Emperor guard named Abbas nodded. "This treasure is in the shape of a triangle, and we are in the world that Chiyu created. It can't just be a coincidence." "No wonder Layden said that we couldn't enter the Divine Land directly," Clement said with a frown. "He said that there was a barrier in the space channel too. I wonder if this barrier can block us." After saying that, he took a casual step forward. As a trace of space wave materialized in front of him, he stepped into the space channel in an elegant manner. Bang! With a muffled sound, Clement staggered backward. He had been so confident that he had bumped into the space barrier without any precaution, making himself look awkward as he tried to regain his balance. "Dang it, the space barrier," he cursed angrily. "It seems that it's not that easy to break through the space barrier of the Divine Land," said Abbas. Clement took a deep breath to calm himself down, and then said, "Layden said that it took them more than 10 years to drill just a small crack in the space barrier. It will not be easy for us to break through the barrier in a short period of time. But those 9 Li guards arrived here a long time ago. They must have been trying to break the space barrier day and night. If we can find them and kill them, we can just continue their work and break the space barrier. This will save us a lot of time," said Abbas. "The spot where they've been drilling must have strong space fluctuations. Although the uppermost part of the Divine Land is wide, it won't be difficult to find that spot." Clement nodded approvingly and cast a satisfactory glance at Abbas. Although Abbas was a mere 1-star Yellow Emperor guard whose cultivation base was the lowest among the group, he was the smartest one. Clement made a mental note to invest more resources in him and make him a powerful assistant in the future. "What we need to do is just to observe the space fluctuation ahead. Let's go." The Yellow Emperor guards returned to their flying ship. The ship maintained an alarmingly close distance from the surface of the Divine Land as it flew. All the Yellow Emperor guards released their spiritual senses as far as possible. The further the spiritual senses spread, the slower they would be in reacting. However, since they were only trying to find space fluctuations, not people who were constantly on the move, the sensitivity of their spiritual senses was more than enough to do so. 30,000 miles away, Ramsey had already set up an array. It was called the Four Spirit Hiding Array, and it could hide everything from outsiders, including the breath of life and soul. Even if someone stood face to face with them, they would not be able to sense the existence of anyone hiding inside the array. The people of the Snake Goddess race, the 9 Li race, Lorena, and the holy beings of the Divine Land were all enveloped by the Four Spirit Hiding Array. "That flying ship is approaching us," Mike said, frowning. "I don't know if they are enemies or friends. But if they are enemies, I will immediately enter the Divine Land," Vanessa said with a smile. Moon rolled his eyes at her and said, "Since our Moon clan has chosen this path, there is no reason for us to retreat just because we encounter difficulties. Although I might not be powerful enough, I will still try my best." Moon was very clear about the staggering amount of difference between a holy being and a warrior at the other shore realm. "They are coming this way. We'd better keep silent," said a holy being of the Sword Clan. Ramsey laughed. "My Four Spirit Hiding Array can block everything, including sound. Whether they can discover us has nothing to do with the amount of noise we make. Even if you shout at them, they won't hear us." But despite Ramsey's words, everyone couldn't help holding their breath when they saw the ship coming closer and closer. It only took a moment for the trumpet flying ship to cover a distance of 30,000 miles at full speed. Even though the Yellow Emperor guards were driving the trumpet flying ship slower than usual in order to observe the space fluctuations, they still arrived in less than half a minute. Clement was sitting with his eyes closed as his spiritual sense spread out like thin threads, densely covering the entire area within a radius of thousands of miles. Space in the chaos was the most stable, even more stable than it was in the source world. Therefore, even the slightest trace of space fluctuation would be very eye-catching. Clement suddenly felt a faint space fluctuation, but it disappeared in a flash. The moment he made a sound, Godfrey stopped the trumpet flying ship. The others were trying to sense the space fluctuation too, but none of them had found anything. "Master Clement, did you sense the space fluctuation?" asked Godfrey. Clement looked to the left and pointed in that direction. "That way. That way. I see nothing. I didn't sense the space fluctuation either." Master Clement's spiritual sense is stronger than ours. Maybe he can see something we can't. The trumpet-flying ship quickly turned and moved in the direction that Clement had pointed in. When Ramsay saw the ship turn toward them, he clenched his fists, and a trace of tension finally appeared on his face. Of course, they had already known that the space fluctuations were likely to reveal their position. But since they had worked so long to excavate the space barrier here, they couldn't give up. That was why Ramsay had specially set up another array to mask its position. However, it was very difficult to completely cover up the space fluctuations. Chapter 2511, A Surprise Attack. The four-spirit hiding array cast by Ramsay was able to hide the space fluctuation. However, slight fluctuations occasionally managed to escape from the array. Ramsay could only hope that the people on the flying ship were so careless that they wouldn't notice the space fluctuation. However, the flying ship paused and then flew towards them. He immediately realized that the warriors aboard had espied the fluctuation. They have sensed it. What should we do? Ramsay asked. Let's see what their next move is, said Timotheus calmly. He also had a bad feeling about what was happening, but he couldn't afford to panic because it would affect others. Soon, the flying ship in the distance slowly approached. It flew past the four-spirit hiding array, almost touching it, and did not stop until it was 100 feet away. The Yellow Emperor guards jumped down from the trumpet-flying ship. Looks like there is no space fluctuation. One of the Yellow Emperor guards looked around but did not sense any. That's impossible, spoke Clement flatly. I felt the space fluctuation twice. It must be nearby. They must have used something to hide themselves so that the space fluctuation would seem faint. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly turned around and stared ahead. Just then, he felt another trace of space fluctuation. Under the cover of the four-spirit hiding array, Emily quietly narrowed her eyes and whispered, they must have noticed it. Where did they come from? I don't even know whether they are allies or enemies. If they are enemies, shall we take action first? Leopold uttered coldly. They may be the Yellow Emperor guards or helpers invited by the Yellow Emperor guards in the Divine Land. For sure, they must be enemies, Emily responded. Hearing Emily's judgment, Lorena blinked her eyes and asked, how did you arrive at that conclusion? Ramsay has hidden the space fluctuation very well. If the newcomers were the outsiders who didn't know anything about the Divine Land, they would probably try their best to break through the Divine Land immediately. If they failed to break the Heavenly Mirror Shield, they might probably, like us, try to break the space barrier. However, they are actually looking for the space fluctuation. Someone must have told them that we are breaking the space barrier, so they are looking for us. Just as Emily finished speaking, Clement stretched out and gently waved his hand. All at once, the array that Ramsay used for hiding the space barrier was broken. A strong space fluctuation spread out, forming a huge spiral floating up. They could not stop digging the space barrier. As long as they stopped, the space barrier could quickly recover. Therefore, Timotheus and the others placed a treasure in the space barrier, letting it dig the space barrier for them. We found it. Wow, this hiding array is ingenious. A sneer appeared on Clement's face. Abbas looked around and said, looks like they have sensed our arrival and have given up on this place. Master Clement, should we continue searching for those 9 Lee guards? Asked Godfrey. Clement thought for a moment and shook his head. They have been digging here for a long time, so it's not that easy for them to give up. We need to guard this place, and we can continue digging the space barrier. Once we break the space barrier, we will be able to enter the Divine Land before they do. Although they had the trumpet-flying ship, the Divine Land was still too large. If the 9 Lee guards hid themselves on purpose, it would be difficult to find them. However, it did not occur to Clement and Abbas that the subjects of their discussion did not go far and were instead hiding several hundred feet away. The voices of Clement and his companions clearly carried over to the people hiding in the four-spirit hiding array. It was now evident to them that Clement and his men came here because of them. They are definitely Yellow Emperor guards, Emily said with certainty. Since they came here for us, it doesn't matter whether they are Yellow Emperor guards or not. We have the upper hand, thanks to Ramsay's array. Timotheus's eyes glinted with murderous intent. With these words, Woodruff was filled with excitement. Yes, looks like we're going to fight. The strongest among them is the young man with gray hair. I can deal with him, Emily said, staring at Clement. The rest of you can fight the others. Emily was extremely decisive. Clement's judgment was correct. They didn't need to look for Timotheus and the others, all they needed to do was to guard the space barrier. Emily had also made the decision without hesitation. Of course Clement wouldn't have expected that Emily and her team were going to kill them, so he gave the order leisurely, "Boss, go into the space channel to check the situation. We should make haste to break the space barrier." "Understood, Master Clement." Boss nodded. As he was about to enter the space channel, the light of the Force-Spirit hiding array suddenly dimmed, and the aura hidden in it was instantaneously released. As soon as Ramsey removed the Force-Spirit hiding array, colorful rings shot out from Emily's hand. The rings were interconnected from the largest to the smallest. At the front was an incomparably sharp spike. Emily had sensed the young man with gray hair was extraordinary, so she spared no effort in trying to kill him. The attack caught the Yellow Emperor guards off guard. They did not expect their quarry to be hiding close by all this time. When they felt the sudden raging aura, they were all stunned. At that moment, Timotheus, Ramsey, Leopold, the rest of the 9 Li race and the other Shore Realm warriors of the Snake Goddess race began to attack the Yellow Emperor guards. However, Clement was not an ordinary other Shore Realm warrior. The moment he felt the aura, his eyes emitted a sharp light. He reached out his hand, and with a slight tap, a blood rune shot out into the air. Boom! When the blood rune exploded, it turned into a mass of black and red blood that blocked Emily's spike attack. Swoosh! The sharp spike speeding toward Clement immediately got sucked into the blood. Then, the sharp spike and the colorful rings behind it weakened, losing their original speed and power. Clement quickly grabbed the weapons. Clement easily foiled Emily's attack and defended himself against his enemy. However, the other Yellow Emperor guards weren't so lucky. The moment Timotheus made his appearance, he stealthily sneaked beside one of the Yellow Emperor guards. In one sharp movement, he twisted his opponent's neck with his large hands. By the time the Yellow Emperor guard realized what happened to him, it was already too late. As Timotheus's hands flashed with a golden light, the half of the Yellow Emperor guard's body had already turned into dust, and the warrior perished. Ramsey, Leopold and the women of the Snake Goddess race joined hands and killed 2 other Yellow Emperor guards. After a short time, 3 Yellow Emperor guards were killed. The other Yellow Emperor guards quickly moved away. Clement held his ground, his face a portrait of calm. He said sardonically, "I applaud your daring. What a surprise to find out that you've been hiding so close all along." Chapter 2512, A Drop of Blood. Emily's face slightly darkened. She had used her full strength with that attack. Unexpectedly, Clement effortlessly resisted it. He was probably stronger than her, but she couldn't stop now. She had already started this. She had no choice but to fight, more so since this was a life or death battle. There was no turning back. As soon as Clement finished speaking, she moved swiftly and disappeared from the spot. At the same time, she sent a message through her life vitality, "Timotheus, let's kill him together." A few moments later, she reappeared beside Clement. Clement was startled when he was engulfed by a colorful halo. It never occurred to him that Emily could use the colorful halo to trap him. The space within the colorful halo had grown thick, and it became difficult to move. He struggled to escape with the grand teleportation but failed. Timotheus took this time to move as well. A strong aura surged through his body. He jumped up, a golden hammer and a long golden awl in each hand. As he flew over Clement's head, a huge golden shadow appeared behind him. The shadow was like the legendary evil god. It released terrifying power and reeked of murderous aura. Timotheus pointed the long golden awl to Clement, his face shadowed. He knocked it hard with the golden hammer in his right hand. Dong! The shadow emitted a vast amount of power, and this power gathered on the awl. It shot toward Clement, who was still struggling inside the halo. This attack from Timotheus was so oppressive that even Emily, who had trapped Clement in the colorful halo, had to retreat. However, she didn't remove the colorful light halo. If she did that, Clement would easily use the grand teleportation to escape. Whoosh! The long golden awl turned into a dazzling golden light and shot towards Clement. Although Timotheus and his group had successfully trapped him and killed 3 Yellow Emperor guards, Clement still didn't take them seriously. He had such a high opinion of himself. Since he joined the Sky Guard Pavilion, he had never taken the ordinary warriors at the other shore realm seriously. He was truly confident this time, and he thought that he was well prepared. But he didn't expect his opponents to be this hungry for victory. They fought desperately, even from the very beginning. He became angry and red-faced, ashamed that he was caught off guard. "Since you have a death wish, I'll give you what you want." After he said that, surprisingly, Clement stood still. His posture was relaxed, and he let the long golden awl hit him. As the awl stabbed into his forehead, a drop of blood ejected from between his eyebrows. When the awl met the blood, a metallic sound was heard. To everyone's surprise, the blood blocked Timotheus' deadly strike. Boom! Suddenly, a blood-red ball hidden on top of Clement's head broke open. As the ball broke, Timotheus and Emily became ashen-faced. Their plan had failed, and it looked like Clement had something more powerful up his sleeve. The latent theurgy. The latent theurgy was commonly seen in the source world. However, there was a huge gap between the powers it released. Its power depended heavily on the people that used it. Just now, Clement displayed the latent theurgy and blocked Timotheus' all-out attack with a single drop of blood. It was incredible. Impressive. You forced me to use the latent theurgy with only one blow. This drop of ethereal spirit blood is so precious to me. I wasn't planning on using it today. The drop of blood released by the latent theurgy floated around Clement. It stopped right on his fingertip. It was difficult to imagine the terrible power it contained. Ethereal spirit blood. He has a drop of ethereal spirit blood. Shock registered on Emily's and Timotheus' faces. The ethereal spirit blood was extremely rare in the source world. Even the strong warriors at the other shore realm like Emily and Timotheus would find it extremely difficult to obtain even just a drop of it. Someone was willing to give Clement the latent theurgy that was made from the ethereal spirit blood. This meant that Clement's status was beyond their imagination. Either he was a very important person among the Yellow Emperor guards, or he came from a very prominent family. Now that this drop of blood has been forced out, I will use it on you. As Clement spoke, his voice was eerily calm. The drop of blood quietly extended in his hand and quickly grew. A mass of blood emerged and turned into a palm-sized ball, in which there was a row of sharp tusks. Kill him. As he spoke, he gracefully pointed at Timotheus, and the blood ball rushed toward him. Then, Clement leisurely turned around, and a blood rune appeared. This blood rune turned into a blood sword in the blink of an eye, and with a flash, it appeared beside Emily and slashed at her head. Clank! Emily stretched out her fingers, and a colorful halo spread to block the chop of the blood sword. However, it seemed that the blood sword could weaken anything. The moment it touched the colorful halo, the light of the halo dimmed. Clement launched the second strike with no mercy, and Emily could only spread another colorful halo. Clank, clank, clank. After a few strikes, Clement still looked relaxed, but Emily was gasping for breath. I wonder why the snake goddess race works with the 9 Li race, Clement said while he was suppressing Emily. He enjoyed the feeling of control that he had over the situation. According to his plan, he would meet the strong warriors at the other shore realm outside the Divine Land. There, he would find out where they came from and which side they were on before he fought them. However, they did not give him the chance, which made him feel upset. What does it have to do with you? Emily answered coldly. She turned her hands slightly, and 2 colorful halos appeared at the same time. One of them blocked Clement's blood sword, and the other headed straight for Clement. Clank, clank. Clement turned the blood sword around with his hand, and the blade of the sword passed the 2 colorful halos at the same time. Right after he broke the halos, he smiled menacingly and stabbed toward Emily's chest. His actions were as smooth as water. If you promise not to work with the 9 Li race, I'll spare the lives of your race. What do you think? The snake goddess race and the bear race weren't enemies to each other in the source world. Without a doubt, Clement had made a good offer. But Emily knew clearly whom she should give her love and loyalty, and it wasn't to him. Since Zen had helped her once, she wouldn't fail him now. She shook her head and said, "Bad idea." As she spoke, she swiftly tilted her body and avoided Clement's blood sword, a charming smile on her face. Her body grew in an instant, and her white and petite fist turned into a huge fist. It was about 100 feet high, and it easily smashed Clement. The sudden burst of the wild god power was far beyond imagination. Clement was sent flying like a broken sack. Chapter 2513, The Power of Moonlight. Clement had his back flat on the ground and his eyes towards Emily who was hovering over him. To Clement's surprise, she had transformed into a giant. Is that the body of a wild god? Clement was sure of what it was. It was almost unbelievable for him, except he knew that Emily had the strength to transform into a giant in such a short period of time. As far as he knew, the ancient god cultivation method had completely disappeared from the source world. And so it shocked him to witness it again in the Divine Land. As soon as Emily had activated the body of Wild God, she immediately launched an attack. She towered over Clement who was looking like a tiny ant for her. She simply held her finger towards Clement, allowed it to emit circles of colorful light and, with great force, pressed Clement with it. Unless Clement found a way to magically escape Emily's giant finger, he was as good as dead. In a moment of desperation, 2 blood runes suddenly emerged from his eyes. In an instant, the power of the 2 runes covered Clement and his entire body was now covered in blood. Bang! The ground beneath them vibrated against the impact of Emily's huge finger. As it did, the heavenly mirror shield appeared on the surface of the divine land. The heavenly mirror shield protected the divine land from the wrath of Emily's force. Otherwise, the divine land would have been shattered into pieces. Any other powerful warrior of the other shore realm would have had turned into a pool of blood with Emily's attack. But Clement still had something up his sleeve. Instead of letting himself be shattered, he gave up his life force and turned himself into a corpse. This way, he turned into a dead man but with an almost invincible corpse. Using this power came with many risks, of course. Each time he would use it, he had to actually kill himself and only a secret method could be used to bring himself back to life. He didn't use it unless he was desperate. As Emily lifted her finger, she was astonished to see Clement's body in full form. She lifted her palm and, with all the rage she had, motioned towards Clement. Colorful lights covered her palm as she slapped with full force. Bang, bang, boom. Clement's corpse rolled on the ground and would occasionally become as thin as a sheet of paper under Emily's attack. His bones, meridians, and viscera were crushed under Emily's palm. But, the moment Emily lifted her hand, his body would recover and remain whole. How dare you? Dang, woman, I'll show you. Bang. Before Clement could finish his sentence, he was attacked by Emily's palm again. As soon as his body recovered, he shouted, Godfrey, what are you doing now? The Yellow Emperor guards, 9 Lee guards, and Snake Goddess race were fighting in a battle. Meanwhile, Godfrey was entangled by Lorena, Mike, Moon and other holy beings. However, the gap of strength between a holy being and another shore realm warrior was too large. Although Godfrey's strength was only slightly stronger than Abbas's and ranked second to last among the Yellow Emperor guards, he alone was enough to counter with all the holy beings. In the battle, he had managed to kill Marsh, the holy being from the Sword Clan. Fiery Soul Attack. Vanessa used a secret technique to launch a soul attack at Godfrey, making her eyes glow a fiery light. The attack was strong. Any holy being would have been defeated, but Godfrey was not. He merely let out a triumphant laugh. He was about to tease Vanessa when he heard Clement's furious roar in the distance. He turned to look at where it came from and was shocked to see Clement lying on the ground like a corpse. Godfrey's eyes widened as he realized Emily, who had assumed the form of a giant, was pressing Clement against the ground. Godfrey left the scene abruptly and raised the jade plate in his hand. Buzz! The jade plate trembled and crescent moons appeared in the sky above the divine land one by one. The crescent moons formed the slaughtering moonlight array. The array was arranged by him as soon as they arrived at the surface of the divine land. Finally, the array revealed itself to everyone. With the help of the divine crystals, power, the slaughtering moonlight array covered an area of tens of thousands of miles. Everyone felt the power of the crescent moons. Everyone raised their heads in acknowledgement. Even Emily was forced to stop the attacks and look at the sky. The slaughtering moonlight array. They brought the powerful array with them. Ramsay shouted in astonishment. Ramsay was proficient in the runic arrays and had studied every array in the source world. He knew that the slaughtering moonlight array, while not the most powerful, was incredibly well known in the source world. People from the 9 Lee race and the Snake Goddess race looked at Ramsay in surprise. Shift the core of the array to me, Clement commanded. Godfrey spun the jade plate and all the crescent moons followed. They rotated in the sky and the beams of bright moonlight shot towards Clement. A blood rune in Clement's hand broke apart and quickly turned into a blood sword. The surface of the sword shone with a layer of silver light as it reflected the moonlight. Clement grinned and glared at Emily with piercing stares as he slashed the sword at her. As soon as he moved, the crescent moons flashed with a silver light. Emily had no time to react. She tried to dodge but was already too late. Next thing she knew, there was a violent tearing pain in her arm. As she glanced over, her right arm had been cut off from her body. As soon as the arm dropped to the ground, it shrunk to its original size. Blood spilled out from her amputated shoulder like a waterfall. Let's see if you can dodge this, Clement teased with a laugh. Once more, he felt invincible. Just as Clement raised his silver sword, a figure clad in green rushed out from the side. It was another shore realm warrior from the Snake Goddess race. Isla, no, Emily exclaimed as she saw the woman in green. Clement sneered and waved the silver sword once more. He wasn't aiming at Isla, but she was blocking his way, and so her body was torn apart from the middle and blood splashed all over the ground. Isla and Emily were incredibly close. Isla had been shadowing Emily for countless years. Emily was devastated at the sight of Isla's broken body. Don't be sad, you'll join her soon, Clement said with a chuckle as he raised the silver sword up high. With the power of the slaughtering moonlight array, he now had everything under his control. Ramsay gnashed his teeth at the sight of Clement. He took out a yellow talisman, patted it, and spurted a mouthful of blood. Hiss! His blood stained the talisman. It burned and erupted into flames. The flames flew towards the crescent moons in the sky. At the same time, Clement slashed his sword at Emily. Chapter 2514, Laughter in the Passageway. As Clement waved the silver blood sword gently, a silver moonlight suddenly appeared not far from Emily. It was the silver moonlight that had cut off one of her arms and cut Isla in half. However, against Clement's expectations, the silver moonlight only flashed for a second before it disappeared without a trace. It was so fast that it was impossible to perceive the power within it. What? Clement frowned. He carefully observed their surroundings and noticed Ramsay in the distance. I'm surprised to see someone among you as proficient in arrays. You can counteract the slaughtering moonlight. You are quite good, Clement said indifferently. Ramsay ignored Clement's praise. He shouted, everyone, leave this place as soon as possible, or you will only get killed. He cut himself off, aware that he had said too much. He almost revealed Lorena's identity. It would have been troublesome if they found out she was their princess. He then said, people from the divine land. Return to the divine land and hide for a while. Holy beings and Lorena would not be rejected by the divine land, so they could enter and leave as they desired. Vanessa hurried towards the divine land almost without any hesitation when she heard that. She had mentioned earlier that if the opponents were too strong, she would retreat to the divine land immediately. After all, the gap between their strength and the other shore realm warriors was too great. However, just as she employed the grand teleportation and built a space channel, a pool of silver moonlight suddenly spread out on the ground beneath her feet, blocking the space channel she had built. Even the space channel is blocked. Lorena, Mike, and the others frowned. They had no way to retreat. At the sight of this, Godfrey chuckled. You're stuck here, and you still want to run. How naive of you. The arrangement of the crescent moons in the sky was a little messy. The burning talisman was still disturbing the entire array, but Ramsay was sure that it wouldn't last long. Once the slaughtering moonlight array was restored to normal, everyone would probably be killed by Clement. In the mountain of holy beings, the breathing sound kept resounding in Zen's ears. As he continued to move forward in the maze, it grew louder and louder. He had been hearing it for hours now. Somehow, he had gradually gotten used to it. The time fragments he saw grew slimmer as he traveled deeper into the slender and long alleys of the maze. The surrounding space had become dense and humid. These fragments appeared as soft as mud. He reached out his hand in curiosity, and a sharp pain assaulted his fingertips. The pieces were like the seawater in the time sea that could cut anything that touched it. However, Zen's body was far stronger than a holy being's. He wasn't afraid of falling into the time sea, so he was not afraid of these soft fragments either. Maybe this is the seawater of the time sea. It has been solidified over time, Zen mused. He was amazed that time could turn into something tangible like this. Not long after, something else Zen saw confirmed his conjecture. The time fragments on the walls of the maze grew softer and softer. They eventually turned into the colorful seawater that was usually seen in time sea. However, the seawater seemed to completely ignore the rules of gravity. It had completely integrated into the wall and slowly flowed through it. With the guidance of the Infinity Ruler, Zen went on for another 5 minutes, before he came upon an even stranger scene. The time sea on the walls took another form. The fragments disappeared and were replaced by colorful walls as if someone had painted a rainbow on the walls. Only, this rainbow was slowly fluctuating. This is a complete space-time. Zen marveled at the walls. The reason why the time sea was extremely dangerous was that it was full of fragments of time. However, the complete space-time was different. The walls stood for complete space-times, so Zen was supposed to be able to freely enter and leave the space, just as how he had entered the world in the Jade Seal when he had been in the Time Sea Forbidden Land. Nonetheless, Zen blinked and decided to be discreet. He didn't know where the complete space-times led to. It would be a bigger trouble if he couldn't get back. I'd better follow the guidance of the Infinity Ruler, he thought. Earlier, he had been surrounded by rhythmic breathing. Now, it had abruptly changed into childish laughter. Soon after, a loud echo resounded from ahead. Zen sensed an astonishing fit of time law coming from the depths of the passageway. A colorful spiral occupied the entire passageway, headed straight for him. As he realized the amazing power in this spiral, amazement flashed in Zen's eyes. There was a trace of fear as well. What's this? Zen eyed his surroundings. His first instinct was to dodge immediately. However, both walls of the passageway were filled with complete space-times, and the huge spiral completely blocked the passageway. To escape, he would have to enter a space-time. The spiral was already in front of Zen. His gaze froze for a second, but he didn't enter a space-time. He didn't know what kind of world was inside these space-times, so he avoided them. He used the power of the Time Jade Seal to do this. As the colorful spiral crushed Zen's physical body, he wiped out the time. This left him standing in his original place as if nothing had happened. He accelerated his speed, but he had not reached far when the cackling laughter returned. At the same time, a rumbling sound rang again in the depths of the passageway. It sounded like another swirling power was rushing toward him. I'm afraid I'm in big trouble this time. A wry smile appeared on Zen's face. There was a limit in the use of the Time Jade Seal. He could only use it 3 times in a short period, or else, the huge bugs hidden in the world would become disobedient. No matter how greedy the bugs were, they didn't want to eat if they were full. Although the number of the giant bugs was large, every time the Jade Seal was used, they were eating the entire world's time. So, there was no problem feeding them, regardless of the brevity of the process. When they had devoured time several times in a row, they couldn't consume more. But Zen had no other choice. Once again, he used the Time Jade Seal to avoid the spiral. Out of the blue, the cackling laughter came back, just as he dodged for a second time. Rumble. The third spiral was on its way. Zen clenched his right hand tightly. The Time Jade Seal could be used again, but he hesitated. This would be his last chance. Chapter 2515, The End of the Passageway. Zen had no idea how deep this passageway was, but he reckoned that he might have already reached the core area of the maze. The spirals were surging toward him one after another from the path ahead. Even if he managed to dodge the spiral right in front of him, he would fail to avoid the next one. In such a situation, the Time Jade Seal proved to be essential. Without it, Zen might have died many times. Or, in other words, in the countless periods of time that he had erased with the Time Jade Seal, he had already been killed. Now, he could only use the power of the Time Jade Seal once more in the near future, so he couldn't waste it casually. As the next spiral surged toward him, Zen suddenly turned to his right and entered the space-time on the wall of the passageway. The moment he stepped into the space, he felt like he had entered a different world altogether. This experience was nothing like how he had felt after entering the world inside the Time Jade Seal. A strong gust of wind blew on his face, carrying many grains of sand with it. These grains of sand were actually colorful particles, each of which contained astonishing cutting power. When they hit Zen, his face contorted in pain. He immediately brought his hands up to his face to protect himself. Then, he looked closely and discovered that he was in some sort of small desert formed by countless colorful grains of sand. The sand. He slowly crouched down and reached out to touch the sand. He immediately felt a sharp pain in his fingertips, like they had been pricked. If he had not had a strong and sturdy body, he might have been hurt by these strange grains of sand. What is this weird place? Zen wondered. Just then, he heard a loud cry from the middle of the desert. The sound seemed to be coming from a baby. As soon as Zen heard it, he associated it with the laughter and the breathing he had heard in the passageway. If there was really a baby in the desert, it was probably the same one that had been in the maze too. Whoosh! Zen leapt up and saw an astonishing scene in front of him. In the middle of the desert was a low basin surrounded by a circular sand dune. There was a golden cross hovering in the air, beneath which a faint shadow of a baby could be seen. The shadow of the baby emitted a powerful aura as it tried hard to fully materialize itself. However, the sand rose up into colorful tornadoes and promptly swept away the shadow. This chain of events kept repeating as if on loop. Every time the baby's body was about to materialize, the colorful tornadoes would roll towards it, immediately tearing its shadow into pieces. Wah! Came the baby's cry every time it disappeared. However, it kept stubbornly putting itself together again while sobbing. The speed at which it was materializing was getting faster and faster, while the speed of the colorful tornadoes was getting slower and slower. If it goes on like this, the baby will be able to completely materialize sooner or later, Zen commented as he watched the scene from midair. Just as he had predicted, it wasn't long before the baby's shadow began to take on a solid shape. He could almost see its smooth skin. The golden cross floating above the baby's head slowly descended, almost touching its forehead. But at this moment, a large crack suddenly appeared in the dark sky right above the basin. And from that crack, water from the time sea poured down like a heavy rain. Most of the water hit the baby's body and completely destroyed it, while the extra water permeated into the desert sand. Although the baby's shadow was destroyed, the cross above it did not disappear. Instead, it remained floating in the center of the basin. Zen was planning to observe the scene for a while longer, but the colorful tornadoes around the basin seemed to have discovered him, and they flew toward him at an incredible speed. Although Zen was not afraid of the sand that was transformed by time, getting caught in the tornadoes would be a disaster. Shocked, he quickly descended from the air without hesitation. He was only a few inches away from the wall from which he had entered this space. The moment he passed through it, he found himself back in the passageway. Zen took a deep breath of relief. He gathered that the scene in the desert was a real story. But what did it all mean? Why was there a baby, and why had the water from the time sea rained down to destroy it? Shortly after Zen returned to the passageway, he heard the strange giggle once again. Bang! From the depths of the passageway, another spiral suddenly flew straight toward him. Since he knew that he could freely enter the space-time walls on both sides of the passageway, Zen didn't panic anymore. This time, he deliberately chose the wall on his left to see what was happening in this specific space. To his surprise, everything here was exactly the same as it had been in the space in the wall to his right. As soon as he entered, a gust of wind carrying colorful sand blew toward him. It was the same small desert, the same circular sand dune, the same golden cross above the basin, and the same shadow of a baby. The scene that Zen had seen a few moments before played out in front of his eyes once again. The baby struggled and cried as it was swept away by the colorful tornadoes. Could it be the same space and the same period of time? Zen wondered, but when he observed the movement of the struggling baby's shadow, he immediately rejected his own guess. Although it was the same shadow, the way the baby was struggling was completely different from before. This meant that this event must have happened more than once in the desert. After struggling for a while, the baby's shadow was about to materialize completely. Zen subconsciously looked up at the dark sky above, knowing what was about to happen. Just as he had guessed, a huge crack appeared in the sky. Water from the time sea fell from the sky and poured down on the baby. Zen shook his head and returned to the passageway. For the time being, he didn't know what this meant, but it didn't matter. The important thing was that he could use the spacetimes on both sides of the passageway to dodge the spirals, so he could still move forward following the instruction of the infinity ruler. Ha. As Zen moved along the passageway, the baby's laughter continued to sound in his ears. When he encountered the spirals again, he unhurriedly entered the spacetimes on the walls. Once the spirals were gone, he once again returned to the passageway. As he continued to move forward, Zen became more and more proficient in traveling between different spaces. Although the baby's eerie laughter became increasingly frequent and more spirals came from the end of the passageway, they didn't affect Zen's speed. As for the scene playing out in the spaces on both sides of the passageway, Zen couldn't be bothered to observe it again and again, because he had realized that it was almost the same every time. An hour later, Zen suddenly heard a whistling sound coming from ahead. As soon as he heard the whistling sound, a single colorful grain of sand was blown out from the end of the passageway and brushed past Zen's face. He immediately felt as if someone had cut his face with a sharp knife. Was this passageway leading to the desert? Such an idea suddenly popped into Zen's mind. Chapter 2516, Original Will. As Zen turned the corner of the passageway, he finally saw what awaited him at the end. As he had expected, the passageway led to a desert made of colorful sand. A gust of strong wind blew a thin layer of colorful sand into the passageway. Without hesitation, Zen walked straight toward the desert. It was exactly the same as what he had seen in the spacetimes on both sides of the passageway. But he clearly knew that those spaces had been windows into the past. The desert in front of him was the one that existed in the present. The main difference he noticed was that the wind in this desert seemed to be much milder, and the tornadoes had disappeared altogether. Zen swept his eyes around for more clues and found that the sand dune in the center of the desert had collapsed. Did the baby manage to materialize and climb out of the basin? Zen wondered, a trace of anxiety gripping him. As if on cue, a chuckle rang out again. As he walked forward, Zen finally saw a gigantic baby on the other side of the sand dune. The baby was playing with the sand on the ground, and the cross that had been hovering above the basin had landed on its head. The baby inserted its hands into the sand and gently kneaded it before throwing the fistful of sand at Zen. As this fistful of sand flew in the air, it turned into a colorful spiral. Whoosh! Fortunately, the spiral wasn't coming at Zen at full speed. He gently twisted his body and avoided the spiral. The baby didn't seem to care at all and continued to giggle with an innocent look on its face. Once again, it gathered the sand in its hands and threw it at Zen, and once again, Zen dodged the spiral. As he moved, he suddenly found that the infinity ruler in his mind had turned in the opposite direction. Now, the infinity ruler was pointing to the baby instead of some part of the maze. Is the infinity ruler guiding me toward the baby? Zen wondered in confusion. His eyes twitched as he struggled to understand what this baby's existence meant. As he was pondering over this, the baby suddenly got up on its feet and stood at a height of almost 400 feet. Then, it ran toward Zen like a tower. Bang, bang, bang. As the baby ran, Zen felt a great rush of pressure approaching him. Not knowing the baby's intentions, he immediately stepped back. The baby was not slow by any means, but fortunately, it was still slow enough for Zen to avoid. But the moment he stepped back, the baby suddenly let out a cry of anguish. Wah! The cry contained a trace of anger, as if the baby was wondering why Zen refused to play with it. The loud sound made Zen's body tremble unwillingly, and he felt as if there was a bell ringing in his ears. The baby's cry, which seemed to be akin to a magic spell, took away his ability to move. He could only watch helplessly as the baby ran over to him. At this moment, he heard No 9527's voice in his mind. Don't you see, this baby is an original will. It wants to devour you. An original will, and it wants to devour me. Zen was slightly stunned. The entire way, while he had been observing the changes in the passageway, number 9527 had been making its own observations as well. At first, number 9527 had also been a bit puzzled by the scenes in the spaces on the walls of the passageway. However, after Zen had arrived at this desert at the end of the passageway, realization had set in. The truth is, when I followed you to the Divine Land, I couldn't figure out how the Divine Land managed to maintain its purity, number 9527 said casually. Maintain its purity? What do you mean? Tell me quickly. That baby is rushing over, Zen said anxiously. The baby looked innocent, but who knew what it was capable of? Anyway, it was able to take away Zen's ability to move just by crying. If the time to fight came, Zen didn't know if he would be able to deal with the baby. However, number 9527 didn't seem to be in a hurry at all. Don't panic. The original will is very simple and innocent. It doesn't have any strategies or ulterior motives. At most, it will just devour you and inherit your will. You think me being devoured is not a big deal? Zen asked incredulously. He didn't know whether to cry or laugh in his heart, but the expression on his face remained blank. He now realized that he couldn't even control his facial muscles. Are you telling me that this baby is the will of the Divine Land? I can't believe this. In fact, Zen had also pondered about the original will of the Divine Land. After all, the evolutionary universe also had its own will, but its will was controllable. However, he had never seen something similar in the Divine Land. Yes, number 9527 said. Generally speaking, when one creates a world and the world leaves their hands, it will have a will of its own. This is inevitable in the grand world cultivation method. Since the Divine Land has been out of Chiyu's hands for such a long time, it should have had its own will all along. But it seems that Chiyu took advantage of the time sea to constantly suppress the Divine Land's own will. What you saw in the space-times on both walls of the passageway is how the Divine Land's will had been suppressed until now. For countless years, this process had been repeated over and over again. Every time the original will was condensed, the water of the time sea would pour down and tear it into pieces, restarting the process. But why has the Divine Land's will finally condensed now? Zen asked. Number 9527 shook its head. I don't know, but it's obvious that the will has just been formed. It can't be long since it happened. There might have been an omission in a session. Or maybe the person who was responsible for overseeing the suppression of the original will died. No 9527 speculation was actually very close to the truth. The person who was responsible for the suppression of the original will of the Divine Land was the leader of the Sun-Blind race. Ever since she had taken over the Time-Sea Forbidden Land, this had become her mission. However, when she had learned that the Mountain of Holy Beings had appeared in advance, she had known that the Infinity Ruler had been activated and that her mission had come to an end. In order to avoid being threatened or put in a tough spot, she had ended her life very decisively. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The biggest problem now is how to deal with this baby, Zen said in his mind. Well, it's actually not a problem. This original will is very pure. It has just been born, so it doesn't have any thoughts or intentions of its own, that's why it has taken a baby's form. Even if the baby devours you, your memories will quickly affect it, and then it will become you. So it wouldn't matter even if you were devoured, number 9527 said with a laugh. What, are you kidding me? I don't want to be devoured. Zen shouted in his mind. Deep in his heart, he knew that no 9527's words were reasonable. Even if he was swallowed by the baby, he would still be Zen, and the baby would be affected by his chaotic memories and eventually turn into him. And yet, Zen felt a huge resistance to the concept of letting himself be swallowed by the baby. Chapter 2517, Devour the Original Will. Bang, bang, bang. The baby ran over to Zen, leaving huge footprints on the desert sand. Although it looked adorable and innocent, Zen couldn't help but shiver as it approached him. Well, if you really don't want to be devoured by the baby, I can help you. To be honest, if we came here even 2 years after the original will was born, I wouldn't be able to do anything. Luckily for you, dealing with the original will in its infancy is a piece of cake for me, said number 9527. You can resist the original will? Zen asked curiously. How could that be possible? This is the will of the divine land. Even though it has just been born, it is impossible for me to contend against it. I am only going to guide it, number 9527 said. This only confused Zen further. Guide it? How? I will let it devour me, of course. As soon as number 9527 said these words, a pale green soul floated out from Zen's chest. This soul was, in fact, only a small part of number 9527, but it contained enough of its essence and its memories to do the job. Bang, 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 the baby was now only a few hundred feet away from Zen. The original will did not actually have a body. This was just the form it had taken. In this form, it was extremely sensitive to soul power, so no 9527's soul quickly attracted its attention. Whoosh, no 9527's soul turned out to be very cooperative. After swirling around in the air for a while, it flew into the baby's mouth, and just like that, the baby swallowed the pale green soul. The baby smacked its lips and looked at Zen hungrily. The soul was rather tasty and the baby wanted more. However, just as it took a step toward Zen, its huge body suddenly trembled, and a trace of green gradually appeared in its originally pure eyes. Slowly, it swaggered toward Zen. Realizing that he could move his body again, Zen asked in surprise, "What on earth did you do to the baby?" It seemed that number 9527 had successfully tamed the baby. It's simple. It swallowed part of my soul, so now, the original will is contaminated by me. However, there is only one will in the soul that it swallowed, and that is to let you devour it, number 9527 explained indifferently. When Zen heard this answer, he was speechless. Could the original will of the divine land be tamed that easily? He couldn't believe it. Number 9527 understood what Zen was thinking and disdainfully explained, "I told you that you could just let the original will devour you. In the end, it would have still been you who survived. I just used another way, but the result will be the same." Zen pursed his lips. No matter what number 9527 said, he couldn't imagine allowing the baby to devour him. As the baby got closer and closer, its body began to shrink rapidly. At last, it turned into the size of a palm and flew toward Zen. Zen was still on high alert. Only after the original will entered his mind and showed no intention of attacking did he finally heave a sigh of relief. He was now sure that the original will had indeed intended to let itself be devoured by him. Zen no longer hesitated to suck it into his soul. Fusing two different souls was an arduous task. Even if one managed to integrate another soul with theirs, there would be a big problem. There was always the risk that the foreign soul would try to expel or even crush the original soul into pieces. As the saying went, one country could not have two queens. However, apart from the will of the fragment of no 9527 soul, there were no other thoughts in the original will. It was very pure, so it was not difficult for Zen to devour it. Nevertheless, devouring the original will of the divine land was not a task that could be completed instantly. After all, the divine land was large and powerful, and so was its will. 4 hours later, a cross quietly appeared in the space between Zen's eyebrows. Then, it disappeared, buried in his forehead. Buzz. As Zen opened his eyes, the mountain of holy beings, which had been floating steadily in the air, shook violently. Zen looked at his hands and then glanced at the world around him. He immediately felt like everything had changed. His understanding of the divine land had been greatly enhanced, and some abilities and knowledge that originally didn't belong to him had come to him. This feeling of having control over everything was so peculiar that he could not get used to it. As he looked down, a sudden thought flashed in his mind. The colorful desert suddenly sprang to life. Grains of sand quickly moved and arranged themselves in an orderly manner, just like soldiers. Then, the desert itself disappeared and was replaced by a colorful staircase. Zen climbed the staircase and made his way back to the passageway. Before, the maze had been full of twists and turns, and it had been impossible for him to proceed without the guidance of the Infinity Ruler. Now, however, the maze kept rearranging itself to show a straight path in front of Zen. Nevertheless, the maze was still large, and the straight path seemed to stretch for thousands of miles. Zen took a deep breath and mentally prepared himself for the long walk ahead. When he took a single step forward, however, his figure vanished. The next moment, his figure appeared at the entrance of the maze, which was connected to the Mountain of Holy Beings. Inside the Mountain of Holy Beings, the competition among the demi-holy beings and consummate true gods had come to the white-hot phase. 2 of the 3 holy springs were still empty. It wasn't that they didn't want to continue challenging each other for the holy springs. But they had been fighting each other for so long that they were all like spent arrows. Every time someone tried to rush into the holy springs, they would encounter sneak attacks from their opponents. It was too much of a risk to take in such a weak state, so most of them chose to stay behind and watch. All of them wanted to recover to their best health in the shortest time possible, so they were pouring pills into their mouths one by one, as if these pills were free. By now, Zen had already passed through the plain and was heading straight for the holy springs. Although he seemed to be moving leisurely, the distance he was covering was astonishing. The space law seemed to have no effect on him. When he took 10 steps, he covered the same distance that other people would only cover with 100 steps. Usually, one would have to use the grand teleportation to achieve this effect. However, Zen wasn't using it. There wasn't even a trace of space fluctuation around him. One of the competitors noticed Zen and his strange movements. "Everybody, look, Zen is here again." In view of Zen's terrifying power, no one dared to ignore him. They all stared at him in awe. Why has he come back here? Is he planning to occupy a holy spring again? Maybe he will try it again. These people immediately became nervous. They knew that even though Zen's attempt to bathe in the holy spring had failed, he would be unwilling to accept it. And if Zen chose to forcibly occupy a holy spring, they wouldn't be able to do anything about it. After all, none of them was a match for him. Zen hadn't planned to pay attention to these people at first. But when he heard what they said, he suddenly stopped. Chapter 2518, Zen's Power. When Zen stopped in midair, the demi-holy beings and consummate true gods watching him began to feel a little nervous. Just now, Zen's movements had been so fast and strange that they hadn't been able to observe him clearly. Now that he was staying still, however, they noticed the dramatic change in him. His aura seemed to be completely different now. Although it was gentle, it also seemed to be almighty, as if Zen was the ruler of the world. The demi-holy beings and consummate true gods suddenly had an urge to bow or even kneel to him. Anyone who could cultivate enough to become a consummate true god or a demi-holy being was considered a top talent in the divine land. All of the people here fighting over the holy springs had the ambition and desire to break through to be a holy being. For this, they would even risk their lives. They would indeed feel awe in the presence of a holy being or a warrior at the other shore realm, but they might not submit to them easily. However, the moment they saw Zen, they felt an involuntary urge to submit to him. It was so irrational that it took them by shock. "You say I came back to occupy a holy spring?" Zen laughed. Then, he stretched out his hand and waved it, causing the entire area to tremble. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. Under everyone's gaze, silver holy springs spurted from the plain one after another. Soon, there were more than 100 holy springs in front of them. These holy springs were arranged in a ring, like a magnificent fountain. What, am I daydreaming? So many holy springs. Does this mean every one of us can become a holy being? The eyes of these demi-holy beings and consummate true gods nearly popped out in surprise. Never in their wildest dreams could they have imagined that Zen could create so many holy springs with just a wave of his hand. How had Zen done it? But regardless of how confused or curious they were much more eager to go ahead and occupy one of the several holy springs. "We don't have to fight with each other anymore. Ha ha, I can also become a holy being. I can do it too. There are more than enough holy springs for all of us." The truth was, none of these people actually wanted to fight with each other. It was just that the scarcity of the holy springs had pitted them against each other. At least this time, 5 holy springs had appeared, so the chances of them becoming holy beings had been relatively larger than in the past, when only 1 holy spring would appear. Back then, the competition had been much more fierce. But now that so many holy springs had appeared, there was no need for competition at all. Whoosh, 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 just as they all began to rush toward the holy springs, Zen waved his hand once again. The holy springs withdrew into the ground just as quickly as they had appeared. Everyone stopped in their tracks and turned to Zen, feeling like they had been given candies only to have them snatched back. They had no idea what was going on or what to say, but they all looked at Zen with pleading eyes. From now on, I will change the rules of the Mountain of Holy Beings, Zen announced calmly. Then, he flew away toward the remote valley. Everyone watched him in silence until his figure finally disappeared out of sight. What happened to Zen? How can he change the rules of the Mountain of Holy Beings? You saw what he did with the holy springs. I wonder what he's obtained from the Mountain of Holy Beings. They were so shocked that they even forgot to fight over the remaining 3 holy springs. Meanwhile, the Yellow Emperor guards were busy taking care of a few things. Even though Samuel's attempt to use Pascal to kill Zen had failed, the Yellow Emperor guards still had some use for him. Samuel could use all his divine might coins to write a rule on the ruling slate. Layton had originally intended to use this rule to deal with the 9 Li guards outside the divine land. However, since Clement was here, he and his people could kill the 9 Li guards. Layton didn't need this rule to deal with them anymore. Instead, he decided to make Samuel write a rule targeting Zen. He couldn't predict the consequences of Zen's entry into the Mountain of Holy Beings, so he had to make sure that Zen would die. Thus, he ordered Samuel to write an extremely strict rule to deal with Zen. The harsher the rule, the more divine might coins it would consume. However, Samuel had plenty of divine might coins in his possession. Except for a small number of divine might coins which he couldn't summon here because of the distance, most of the divine might coins in the divine land had been brought to the Han clan. Samuel melted all these coins into ink and wrote down a rule to kill Zen on the ruling slate. However, he soon ran into a complication. He had wanted Zen to perish in the Mountain of Holy Beings, but it was not until he began writing that he found that the rules on the ruling slate couldn't involve the Mountain of Holy Beings. Any rule involving the Mountain of Holy Beings would disappear from the ruling slate as soon as it was written. In a fit of desperation, Samuel wrote the next best thing he could come up with. As long as Zen steps into the divine land, he began to write. This was no longer a rule, but a curse. If such a curse was aimed at a group, it would cost a huge number of divine might coins, perhaps more than the number of divine might coins that actually existed in the divine land. In that case, Samuel might not even be able to write a single word. After all, such a rule would destroy the balance of the entire divine land. Perhaps Chiyu had carefully designed the ruling slate with this in mind. However, since Samuel's rule was aimed at Zen alone, the number of divine might coins required was just barely within the range of acceptance. He had to use up almost all of the divine might coins that the Han clan had robbed recently to vaguely write down this rule. After that, all they could do was wait. The moment Zen left the Mountain of Holy Beings, he would be killed by this rule, and then they would have no more worries. Clement and his people had already gone to the outside of the divine land, and no one in the divine land could contend with them anymore. Everything was developing for the better. The other Yellow Emperor guards did not remain above the time sea. Before Zen and the other 2 entered the Mountain of Holy Beings, Estelle had given them her support. She had silenced the whole divine land so that the 3 of them could enter the Mountain of Holy Beings. However, at the last moment, Layton had used the sea-cracking skull to break Estelle's scepter of God's silence. Enraged by the incident, Layton had ordered Xavier and Selim to hunt Estelle down. Every time Estelle used the scepter of God's silence, powerful energy waves would be generated, and then they would quickly dissipate. However, the traces that they left behind would linger for a long time. Such traces would go unnoticed by normal warriors, but they didn't escape Selim's eyes. In addition, Selim was also able to find out her whereabouts through the space fluctuations produced when she used the grand teleportation. Thus, Selim and Xavier followed the space fluctuations all the way. In the meantime, Estelle and Holy J were as careful as they could be. Ever since Zen successfully entered the Mountain of Holy Beings, Estelle and Holy J had used the grand teleportation more than 100 times until they finally stopped in a small remote place, where they believed they would be safe. Of course, leaving the divine land altogether would have been much safer, but they wanted to stay behind to observe whether Zen succeeded or not. 2 universes shook, indicating that 2 of them have succeeded in becoming holy beings. But only 2. Do you think something has gone wrong? Estelle speculated. Holy J had made the same observation, but he still said, the competition in the Mountain of Holy Beings won't end so soon. It's useless for us to speculate about it. Let's just wait and see. Just then, a space crack opened above this small town, and Xavier and Salim jumped out of it. They found Estelle and Holy J. Chapter 2519, The Power of the Ruling Slate. Estelle and Holy J looked up. When they felt the auras of the newcomers, their eyes widened in shock. 2 yellow Emperor guards had arrived. Estelle and Holy J had already witnessed the strength of these 2 guards before, so the moment they saw them, the only thought that came to their minds was to escape. They had traveled using grand teleportation several times before finally stopping at this remote place, and yet these 2 warriors at the other shore realm had been able to follow them. Obviously, they had some kind of secret tracking technique, so it didn't make sense to continue playing the game of cat and mouse with them in the Divine Land. Right now, the best place for Estelle and Holy J to go to was the latter's universe, the Divine Refinement Forbidden Land where Zen had cultivated before. Holy J's universe was protected by the rules of the ruling slate, so even the yellow Emperor guards wouldn't dare to break in. As Holy J gently waved his hand, ripples appeared in the space in front of him. Just as Estelle and Holy J were about to step forward and disappear into the universe, Salim laughed coldly and said, "Seal." Crack. All space within 1,000 miles was immediately sealed. The divine citizens and the rest of the creatures living there did not notice any change in the environment, but the ripples that had appeared in front of Estelle and Holy J disappeared without a trace. "You want to escape right under our noses?" "No way," Xavier said, leisurely stretching his body. The power pouring out from his body was rapidly accumulating. Like a hidden leopard, he was ready to launch a fatal attack at any time. Holy J and Estelle narrowed their eyes slightly. They had not expected the yellow Emperor guards to find them at all. If they had, they would have escaped to the universe or at least to the outside of the Divine Land as soon as Zen entered the Mountain of Holy Beings. Salim also smiled faintly. Anyone who attempts to attack the yellow Emperor guards will have to pay the price. Then, along with Xavier, he slowly descended to the ground and strolled toward Holy J and Estelle. In their eyes, the holy being and the consummate true God in front of them were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. However, Holy J and Estelle didn't plan on waiting for death to come. Their minds were racing as they desperately tried to think of a way out of here. Meanwhile, in the Mountain of Holy Beings, Zen finally arrived at the gate. Without any pause, he took a small step forward and entered the silver passageway. All the holy beings of the Divine Land were gathered around the mountain, eagerly waiting to find out which of the warriors who had entered the mountain had become holy beings and which of them hadn't. The result was very important to them. However, they weren't expecting anyone to come out of the mountain anytime soon. There was still a long time before the Mountain of Holy Beings would close, and normally, no one would retreat halfway. But just then, ripples appeared on the surface of the gate under the Mountain of Holy Beings, and a figure stepped out from them. "Is that Zen?" Clark frowned slightly. He didn't make it. A look of surprise came over Murphy's face. All the holy beings of the alliance of the powerful clans had witnessed Zen's power before. They had thought that with his strength, he would definitely become a holy being. And since he had managed to enter the Mountain of Holy Beings, they had no doubt that he would be able to occupy a holy spring. Murphy had even discussed this with his group. "Since he has failed to become a holy being, I'm afraid he's going to have a miserable end," said Zeke. The yellow Emperor guards also had their eyes fixed on the gate of the Mountain of Holy Beings. How could they let Zen go so easily? What they did not know was that Layton and Samuel had already come up with a thorough plan and wrote a rule on the ruling slate to kill Zen. The moment Zen stepped out into the Divine Land, that rule was activated. A golden light flashed through that eye-catching rule in the middle of the ruling slate, and even the mountain that bore the slate started to shake. A powerful force began to gather. Crack, crack, crack. Azure blue lightning crackled and multiplied around the slate, almost covering it. The power released by the terrifying lightning came down from the sky above the time sea and enveloped every floating island. Overwhelmed by the power of the lightning, the floating islands of the powerful clans began to shake violently like boats on a stormy sea. Some of the people who were standing on the edge of the floating islands slipped and fell into the time sea. Everyone else on the floating islands immediately fell to the ground as well, unable to keep their balance. Many of them tried to get up, but the massive pressure from the sky kept them pressed on the ground. Fear appeared on their faces as they found themselves unable to resist the power. What is this? Is it doomsday? Who knows? I've been on this floating island for less than 2 years, and so many things have happened already. I shouldn't have come here. Why do I feel like our floating island is sinking? They all fretted about what was happening. The truth was, the floating islands were indeed sinking. The terrible pressure was pressing the floating islands down like a huge invisible hand. For countless years, these islands had been floating in the air by virtue of the magic arrays set up by the powerful clans and their own buoyant force. But as the powerful pressure continued to press them down, they began sinking into the time sea. The floating island of the Luo clan was the first to begin sinking into the time sea. After the last ranking of the floating islands was decided, the floating island of the Zhou clan had fallen into the time sea. The Luo clan's floating island, which had been ranked just above the Zhou clan's, was supposed to be safe until the next ranking. However, this sudden pressure was pressing the bare floating island of the Luo clan into the time sea now. Like all the other floating islands that had sunk into the time sea before, the large floating island of the Luo clan was quickly disintegrated and torn up in the sea before finally vanishing without a trace. Once the floating island of the Luo clan completely disappeared from sight, it seemed that the rest of the floating islands would follow. The floating islands of another two clans both looked to be in a precarious position. These two floating islands were different from that of the Luo clan. After all, the floating island of the Luo clan had been completely empty, but these two islands were full of people. Some of the true gods were quick to react. As soon as they realized that something was wrong, they wanted to escape through the transmission arrays, but they couldn't move even a step under the huge pressure. In the end, only some of the guards guarding the transmission arrays managed to escape. Noticing the severity of the situation, a holy being from one of the two clans appeared in worry. In a flash, he appeared beneath his floating island. At this moment, the base of the island was hovering only a few feet above the time sea. Half of the holy being's body was submerged in the sea, but he managed to support the floating island with his shoulders. With his strength, the floating island slowly rose against the pressure. Chapter 2520, The Strongest Thunder Punishment. The holy being had supported his clan's floating island just in time to prevent it from falling. Afterward, the holy beings of other clans also supported their respective clans' floating islands. The warriors that took action included the holy beings of the Bai clan, the Zhao clan, the Li clan, the Qin clan, and the Mu clan. In fact, the demi-holy beings on the floating islands also could hold a floating island. Nonetheless, all of the demi-holy beings were fighting for the title of holy being in the mountain of holy beings. Because of such circumstances, the holy beings could only do it in person. However, not all floating islands had the holy beings at that moment. There were still some that needed some help. The Dongfang clan had already given up on their floating island due to the threat from Samuel. The whole floating island was already empty with no people. With no holy being to support it, the floating island fell down under the enormous pressure. Similarly, the Sword clan and the Moon clan did not submit to Samuel. As such, the disciples of the two clans had been taken away from the floating islands. Thus, there were no holy beings to support the floating islands of the two great clans. Therefore, the top three floating islands had begun to haphazardly fall. It was a spectacle that was surprising yet depressing. Amidst the falling process, the floating islands of the Sword clan and the Dongfang clan almost hit the floating island of the Tang clan. Fortunately, while he was supporting the Tang clan's floating island, Clark released tremendous power and pushed the island a little far away from the two falling islands. Thus, the Tang clan's floating island wasn't hit and was left intact. Inevitably, the three floating islands fell miserably into the time sea. Not a single trace was seen after their descent. The Hall of Holy Beings still floated steadily in the air without any sign of decline. Layden stood firmly on the ground of the Hall of Holy Beings as if he was stuck to it. It was only through this strong stance that Layden managed to stop the Hall of Holy Beings from falling. He looked at the azure light that gathered majestically above his head. His beautiful eyelids constantly twitched. The ruling slate was suddenly activated, which indicated that Zen had finally left the mountain of holy beings alive. However, Layden's face had no indication of delight nor happiness. The power of the ruling slate represented the power of the divine land. When the power of the ruling slate was activated by the divine might coins, the results were far beyond Layden's imagination. Even as a 3-star yellow emperor guard, Layden was still a little afraid of the tremendous power it released. Layden couldn't help but wonder how great it would be if Zen was killed by the ruling power of the ruling slate. If Zen truly had inherited the original will, he would be able to control the power of the rule without being afraid of it. Such a feat could make him even more dangerous. Layden couldn't imagine the consequences. Crack, crack, crack. Those bolts of azure lightning coiled together like countless dragons. As soon as they had gathered together, they shot towards the sky. The pressure upon them suddenly disappeared without a trace. All the disciples felt their chests became relaxed. When Layden saw that the thunder of punishment was going straight to the mountain of holy beings on the north of the time sea, a fierce light flashed across his eyes. Since the result would be decided soon, he reached out his hand and gently grabbed the sea-cracking skull that had been placed in the center of the Hall of Holy Beings. As a result, a strong smell of blood spread out. Both he and the sea-cracking skull disappeared from where they were. Almost immediately, they appeared on the north of the Time Sea. Additionally, Hamish and Lorcan also appeared there at the same time. The three Yellow Emperor guards looked cautiously at each other. Although they didn't say anything, they knew that the result would be inevitably determined soon. An intense atmosphere was felt between the three of them. All they wanted was the death of Zen. If he could be killed, everything would finally be over. As such, a small sense of expectation lingered in their hearts. Perhaps Zen hadn't obtained the original will. The three of them were just too worried about that. They even let Samuel spend many divine might coins. Additionally, maybe the original will of the divine land had a great restriction. Chiyu had chosen to suppress the original will at the very beginning. With his character, he was not even willing to see the birth of the original will. Even if the original will appeared, it would bring a great restriction. One would not simply be considered the master of the divine land even if they successfully merged with the original will. The holy beings realized that the pressure had disappeared. Simultaneously, they followed the thunder of punishment after the floating islands had been stabilized. Confused expressions painted their faces as they wondered who the target of the thunder of punishment was. After he lost the trump card, Pascal, Samuel could only place his hopes on the ruling slate. If he could murder Zen, that could be a way to make amends for his mistakes. Additionally, he could even retain his position and earn Layden's trust. Crack! The thunder of punishment coursed through the air with extreme haste. Even though the time sea was incredibly vast, a bolt of lightning crossed it in a blink of an eye. However, the thunder of punishment unleashed by the ruling slate was very special. With its immense power, it was akin to an electric dragon that zapped anything in its path. With a speed that was neither too fast nor too slow, it traversed the time sea within 30 seconds. Zen immediately noticed it as soon as the ruling slate was activated. Accompanied with a serious face and formidable stance, he stood firmly at the foot of the mountain of holy beings. Without any word, he patiently waited for the thunder of punishment to descend. The moment the thunder of punishment appeared above the mountain of holy beings, a dreadful pressure immediately fell from the sky. Several holy beings were shaken by the immense pressure they suddenly suffered. Why is the thunder punishment of the ruling slate descending? Is it here to punish Zen? There shouldn't be such a powerful rule on the ruling slate. Is that even possible? How did Zen even manage to activate the ruling slate? Is it the Yellow Emperor guards who did this? The inexplicable chain of events caused confusion among the holy beings. Even Murphy, Clark, and Jeremiah were also bewildered. In fact, they could also think of the big amount of divine might coins that the Han clan took away. Nonetheless, they were not allowed to get close to the ruling slate, so they weren't able to find out the new rule written on the ruling slate. It was impossible for those holy beings to even think that Samuel had spent most of the divine might coins in the divine land just to write a rule targeted at Zen alone. The enormous pressure disturbed the airflow and formed hurricane-like winds. As his black hair fluttered in the wind, Zen looked indifferently at Layden in the distance. A strong smell of blood emanated from the huge sea-cracking skull beside Layden. When he entered the mountain of holy beings, Layden might have broken Estelle's scepter of God's silence with the use of that thing. Additionally, the blood of the divine citizens and true gods that had been taken away before should have been absorbed by it. When he saw that Layden had such a complex expression, Zen slightly tilted his head and gently raised his hand. A rather warm smile was seen in Zen's lips. The thunder that circled in the air finally came down. With the sudden surge of power, Zen simply raised his hand. Bang! The violent thunder poured down mercilessly onto Zen's body. With its powerful electricity, it easily tore his flesh bit by bit. The azure blue light grew extremely brilliant. Even the holy beings and the other shore realm warriors could not see Zen's figure with their eyes. Any spiritual sense they emitted was immediately torn to pieces before it reached the thunder and lightning. Rumble! The thunder continued to echo with an ominous sound. Each strike made the holy beings frown. The power hidden in the ruling slate was simply incredible. Clark, who was observing in the distance, opened his mouth, but in the end, he couldn't utter a word. With a feeling of helplessness, he was overwhelmed by such a miserable sight. He wanted to say that he himself couldn't survive the thunder punishment and would immediately die in just a blink of an eye. Even the other shore realm warriors such as Layden and Hamish were shocked, not to mention a holy being like Clark. However, they also felt a little relieved. Fortunately, they had supported and cultivated Nicholas before. Eventually, they had successfully controlled the Hall of Holy Beings. If the powerful clans on the floating islands had teamed up and spent some divine might coins making a rule against the strong other shore realm warriors, they would probably have been directly killed by the thunder of punishment.